The head of corporate security slid the federal espionage warning across the mahogany table. It was a slow, deliberate movement, the kind reserved for criminals who are about to lose everything. He thought I was cornered. He thought he had caught a rogue employee selling 3 terabytes of classified pharmaceutical research to the black market. What he did not know was that my husband had spent the last 12 months setting this trap to ensure I spent the rest of my life in a federal prison. 48 hours earlier, Derek had walked out of our 15-year marriage, leaving a cowardly note on my kitchen island, promising I would never manage alone. He thought framing me for corporate treason would force me to crawl back to him, begging for legal fees and salvation. Instead, I audited his flawless crime and turned his own weapons against him. My name is Valerie. I am 42 years old, and today I sat in a glass-walled boardroom 32 floors above the Delaware skyline, preparing to dismantle a man who severely underestimated his wife. If you have ever been pushed to the edge by a narcissist who mistook your quiet patience for weakness, tell me your age in the comments below. Welcome to the Emily Told Stories channel. Hit the subscribe button and stay with me because you will want to hear every single detail of this execution. The air inside the boardroom tasted like ozone and filtered ventilation. Outside, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city of Wilmington stretched out in a gray grid of banking headquarters and corporate law firms. Down in the coastal town of Lewis, where my family owned generations of agricultural land, the morning breeze smelled of salt and damp earth. Up here, the air was thin and unforgiving. Victor sat across from me. His suit was expensive, his posture rigid. Beside him sat Diane, the director of human resources. Diane adjusted her silver watch twice in 10 seconds. Her gaze kept darting to the heavy oak door, as if she expected federal marshals to burst through the hinges at any second. Victor tapped his index finger against the thick, red tabbed folder resting between us. The sound echoed in the quiet room like a ticking clock. 3 terabytes, Valerie. His voice was stripped of any professional courtesy. Proprietary compound data from our Phase 3 oncology trials, downloaded to an external, untraceable server late Sunday night. Diane folded her hands tightly on the table. The access logs match your employee identification number. You bypass the standard firewalls because of your role as a senior compliance auditor. The board of directors is drafting your termination notice right now. The authorities have been notified. A lesser professional might have crumbled under the weight of those sentences. Tears, frantic denials, or desperate pleas were the standard reactions to the threat of a federal indictment. But I had spent 2 decades of my life untangling financial disasters and corporate anomalies. My daily routine consisted of finding the cold, hard truth hidden inside rows of digital data. Numbers rarely lied. Husbands, on the other hand, made a habit of it. I did not blink. I did not raise my voice. I simply unclasped my leather briefcase and retrieved my tablet. Victor narrowed his eyes as I woke the screen. The transfer initiated at 11:14 on Sunday night. He stated the fact like a physical blow. The terminal listed was 4B, located on the 4th floor analytics wing. I traced my thumb along the edge of my tablet, letting my breathing fall into a slow, measured rhythm. Panic was a luxury I could not afford. Terminal 4B, I repeated softly, looking up to meet his intense stare. A hardwired desktop. Yes, Victor replied, a muscle feathering in his jaw. Requiring your physical swipe card and your encrypted password. My fingers moved over the smooth glass screen with practiced precision. I bypassed the standard employee portal and accessed the internal facility biometric database. I turned the device around and pushed it across the polished wood until it rested exactly parallel to his red-tabbed folder. This is the building biometric security log for Sunday night. I instructed, my tone carrying the calm authority of someone conducting a routine training seminar. At 11:12, My badge swiped into the secure physical server room on the 8th floor. As you know, Victor, the 8th floor server room requires a retinal scan to enter and another retinal scan to exit. Victor stopped tapping the folder. He leaned forward, his eyes scanning the glowing screen. Diane stopped adjusting her watch. I did not log an exit from the 8th floor until 2:04 on Monday morning. I continued leaning back in my leather chair. I was conducting the scheduled quarterly compliance review on the offline servers. Terminal 4B is 4 stories down. Unless you are suggesting I possess the ability to phase through reinforced concrete ceilings, those access logs are fabricated. Someone spoofed my credentials. Silence fell over the boardroom. The hum of the climate control system suddenly sounded deafening. Diane looked at Victor. The righteous certainty in her posture dissolved, leaving behind a pale mask of dread. Victor stared at my tablet, scrolling through the indisputable timestamps. The tension in the room mutated from accusation into genuine corporate terror. They had caught the wrong ghost. The internet protocol address was masked to look like an internal terminal, Victor murmured, speaking more to the data than to me. But to bypass the secondary firewall from an outside location, they would still need the physical two-factor authentication token, the rotating algorithm key. They would, I agreed, my mind running 3 steps ahead of the conversation. Diane exhaled a long, shaky breath. She reached across the table and slowly pulled the termination papers back into her portfolio. Valerie, we have a catastrophic breach on our hands. If the authorities walk into this lobby today, our stock plummets and the oncology trials halt. She paused, studying my unbothered demeanor. You understand the architecture of this firm better than anyone in the IT department. Keep this quiet. We need you to track the digital footprint. Find the leak from the inside before the federal investigators tear this company apart. I looked at both of them. 10 minutes ago, they were ready to hand me over to the government in handcuffs. Now, they were handing me unrestricted shadow access to the entire corporate network. I will need an unmarked security clearance, I said, keeping my voice level, and total autonomy. Done, Victor replied instantly. I stood, smoothing the front of my tailored blazer. I will find your ghost, Victor. I turned and walked out of the boardroom. The heavy glass doors sealed shut behind me, muffling the frantic whispers of the executives. I pressed the button for the elevator and stood looking out over the city skyline. The cold adrenaline that had kept my hand steady during the interrogation slowly receded, leaving behind a chilling clarity. Victor was right. To bypass that specific corporate firewall, the intruder needed more than my encrypted password. They needed the physical two-factor authentication token. It was a small encrypted drive that generated a new access code every 60 seconds. I only owned 2 of them. One hung on the lanyard around my neck, resting against my collarbone. The other, the emergency backup, was locked inside a fireproof safe in the master bedroom of my house. Only 2 people on Earth knew the numerical combination to that safe. I knew it, and Derek knew it. The elevator chimed, arriving at my floor, but I did not step inside. The jagged pieces of the puzzle began snapping together, tearing through the lingering illusion of my marriage. Derek did not just pack a bag and leave a petty note. He orchestrated a highly coordinated financial and professional assassination. To understand the magnitude of the corporate sabotage sitting on that boardroom table, I had to rewind the timeline. I had to go back to the silent, empty house, the missing security key, and the exact moment my reality shattered. 48 hours before sitting in that glass boardroom, I was driving south on Route 1. The transition from the sterile corporate landscape of Wilmington to the flat, sandy beaches of Lewis usually acted as a decompression valve for my mind. My family had occupied this stretch of the first state for 3 generations. My grandfather built a sprawling poultry farming operation from the ground up, turning acres of quiet agricultural plains into a legacy of hard work and resilience. When he passed away, the coastal property became my inheritance. It was supposed to be my sanctuary, a place where the relentless demands of pharmaceutical compliance auditing faded into the rhythmic sound of the Atlantic tide. Pulling into the driveway that Sunday evening, the coastal air felt unusually heavy. The setting sun cast long, dark shadows across the manicured lawn. Derek usually left the porch light on when he beat me home. Tonight, the front of the house remained wrapped in darkness. I unlocked the front door and stepped into the foyer. The silence inside felt wrong. It lacked the familiar hum of the television or the clinking of dishes in the sink. The air was stagnant, carrying a faint trace of his expensive cologne, but missing the underlying warmth of a lived-in space. I set my briefcase down on the hardwood floor. The thud echoed through the empty hallway. I walked into the kitchen. The overhead pendant lights reflected off the dark granite of the island. Resting dead center on the polished stone was a single piece of white stationery. My chest tightened. I approached the island with slow, measured steps. The handwritten letters were sharp and hurried, bearing the undeniable slant of my husband of 15 years. I picked up the paper. The texture felt rough against my fingertips. You will never manage alone. You will come crawling back. I read the 2 sentences 3 times. The words did not make sense. They belonged in a cheap television drama, not on my kitchen counter. For a fleeting second, my brain tried to construct a logical explanation. A terrible joke. A misunderstanding. But the closet door in the hallway stood slightly ajar, revealing empty hangers where his winter coats usually hung. The physical reaction hit me in waves. My fingertips grew numb. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic rhythm demanding panic, demanding tears. A typical wife might have collapsed onto the tile floor. She might have dialed his number dozens of times, leaving hysterical voicemails begging for an explanation. But the man who wrote that note fundamentally misunderstood the woman he married. He mistook my quiet, supportive nature for dependency. He assumed that because I handled the intricate details of our lives, from the mortgage payments to the grocery lists, I would be paralyzed without his presence. The shock receded, leaving behind a hard, icy resolve. The wife vanished. The auditor took over. I turned away from the note. I walked straight to my home office and woke up my personal laptop. The screen cast a bright blue glow across the dark room. I opened my secure browser and navigated to our joint banking portal. My fingers flew across the keyboard, entering credentials with mechanical precision. The dashboard loaded. The numbers stared back at me, stark and undeniable. Checking account balance, 0. Primary savings account balance, 0. Emergency fund balance, 0. My breathing slowed. I clicked on the transaction history tracing the digital bleed. The withdrawals did not happen all at once. They were methodical, calculated transfers initiated over the last 72 hours. He kept the amounts just under the threshold that would trigger an automatic fraud alert from the bank software. He siphoned 15 years of shared equity into an untraceable external routing number. I stared at the empty ledger. The audacity of the theft required a level of meticulous planning that did not align with a sudden emotional departure. Derek was a man who complained about organizing the garage. He lacked the patience for complex financial maneuvers. Someone else was pulling the strings, or he had been planning this betrayal for months. A chilling thought struck me. I pushed the chair back and walked briskly down the hall to the master bedroom. I bypassed the empty drawers and the vacant spots on the bathroom vanity. I went straight to the walk-in closet. Hidden behind a row of my winter sweaters was a heavy, fireproof safe bolted directly into the foundation. I punched in the 6-digit numerical code. The heavy metal mechanism clicked. I pulled the thick steel door open. My passports were still there. The vintage jewelry inherited from my grandmother remained in its velvet box. The envelope of emergency cash sat untouched. I reached past the valuables, feeling along the back wall of the cold, dark interior. My hand grabbed empty space. The secondary two-factor authentication token was gone. I pulled my hand back as if the metal shelf had burned me. The small encrypted flash drive was the master key to my entire corporate profile. It was the failsafe required to bypass the highest level of security at the pharmaceutical firm. Derek knew exactly what that token was. He knew it was the only piece of hardware capable of mimicking my digital identity outside the company walls. The stolen money was devastating, but the missing security key was a declaration of war. This was not a divorce. This was a heist. He did not just want to leave the marriage, he wanted to orchestrate a total professional assassination. He took the token to frame me for something catastrophic, knowing the resulting legal nightmare would drain whatever resources I had left, forcing me to fulfill the cruel prophecy written on that kitchen note. I stood up, closing the safe door with a definitive thud. The pieces of the puzzle were terrifying, but they were clear. I needed to lock down my personal credit. I needed to trace the routing numbers from the joint accounts. I needed to document every single missing item in the house before he could return to cover his tracks. I walked back to the kitchen to retrieve my phone. I needed to call Victor at corporate security to report the compromised authentication key before Derek could use it. Before I could unlock the screen, the device vibrated in my palm. The caller identification displayed the name of a local Delaware credit union. It was a branch located just a few miles up the highway in Rehoboth Beach. It was a bank I had not done business with in over a decade. I tapped the green icon and brought the speaker to my ear. Valerie Butler. I answered, my voice steady and hollow. Good evening, Mrs. Butler. The male voice on the other end sounded professional, but strained. This is Marcus from the Loan Recovery Department at First State Financial. I apologize for calling so late on a Sunday, but we have been unable to reach your husband. Derek is unavailable, I replied carefully. How can I help you? I am calling regarding the secondary property loan attached to your Lewis residence, Marcus stated. The 30-day grace period expired at 5 o'clock this afternoon. We are issuing a formal notice of default. The kitchen seemed to tilt. The granite island beneath my hand felt suddenly unstable. A secondary property loan, I repeated the words, tasting like ash in my mouth. Yes, Mrs. Butler. The home equity line of credit approved 6 months ago. The balance is currently maxed out, and the account is severely delinquent. If we do not receive the minimum payment by tomorrow morning, we will be forced to initiate foreclosure proceedings on the property. I looked down at the note still resting on the counter. You will never manage alone. He had not just drained our liquid assets. He had secretly leveraged the very house I inherited from my family. The house that stood on the land my grandfather cultivated with his bare hands. He timed his departure perfectly, ensuring the default notice would hit the exact moment I was most vulnerable. He wanted the bank to take my home. I will handle it, I told the bank representative. Email me the original signed loan documents immediately. I hung up the phone before he could reply. The silence of the house returned heavier and darker than before. I was standing in a home that belonged to the bank, mourning a marriage that never existed, facing a husband who had spent the last year secretly digging my grave. The phone vibrated again, signaling a new email in my inbox. The attached digital file contained the fraudulent loan documents. I opened the file, preparing to find the next weapon he had hidden in the paperwork. The glowing screen of my laptop illuminated the dark kitchen, casting sharp blue shadows across the granite island. The email from the loan recovery department sat at the top of my inbox, ticking like a hidden explosive. I clicked the secure attachment. A 40-page portable document format file downloaded to my hard drive. The title read, Home Equity Line of Credit Agreement. My pulse maintained a slow, steady rhythm. I picked up the computer and carried it down the hall to my home office, leaving the cruel handwritten note abandoned in the dark. My workspace was a sanctuary of order. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls, holding thick binders of corporate regulations and pharmaceutical compliance manuals. A heavy mahogany desk anchored the room, facing a window that looked out toward the unseen ocean. I sat in my leather chair, taking a deep breath of the quiet air before opening the digital file. The first page displayed the principal loan amount, $300,000. Borrowed against the equity of the coastal land my family had held for near a century. The auditor inside me took total control, pushing the betrayed wife into a locked mental vault. I scrolled through the dense pages, reading the legal boilerplate with surgical precision. The terms were predatory. Adjustable interest rates, punitive default clauses. Derek had agreed to toxic financial conditions just to extract the highest amount of liquid cash in the shortest possible time frame. He never intended to make a single payment on this debt. He treated my inheritance like an automated teller machine. I reached the final section. Page 38 contained the execution clauses and the signatures. I zoomed in on the screen, magnifying the digital scan until the pixels began to blur at the edges. Below Derek and his messy scrawl was my own name, Valerie Butler. The looping letters and the sharp cross of the consonant looked flawless. A casual observer would swear I signed it myself. Beside the forged signature sat a circular notary seal. I analyzed the stamp. The emblem belonged to a registered Delaware notary public. I noted the commission expiration date and the identification number. A quick cross-reference on the state government portal revealed the commission was active, but the registered address belonged to a commercial real estate firm in Dover. Why would my husband use a commercial real estate notary for a residential equity loan? The discrepancy was a loose thread. I logged the detail in my mind, pulling on it gently, saving it for later. I returned my attention to the forged signature. Something about the digital ink bothered my trained eyes. Standard legal documents are executed in black or blue ballpoint. The high-resolution scan captured a distinct variation in the pigment. It was not standard blue. It possessed a rich, dark purple undertone, a deep indigo. The ink appeared thicker in certain areas, indicating the use of a wet nib rather than a ballpoint roller. My stomach turned cold. I minimized the window and looked down at the center drawer of my mahogany desk. My hands hovered over the brass handle for a fraction of a second before pulling it open. The velvet-lined insert was perfectly organized. Paper clips sat in their designated tray. Binder clips rested beside fresh notepads, but the custom-molded slot on the far right side was empty. My grandfather was a man who built his life from the soil of the First State. He started with a single chicken house and expanded it into a sprawling agricultural enterprise. He wore dirt on his boots and washed his hands with coarse soap. But when he signed the deeds to purchase new acreage, he used one specific tool: a vintage fountain pen, silver barrel, 14-karat gold nib, filled exclusively with custom-blended deep indigo ink. When he passed away, he left me the coastal property and that pen. He told me to use it only when signing something that secured my future. Derek stole the heirloom. He used the very instrument that symbolized my family legacy to forge my name and steal my home. The precision of the forgery meant he had practiced. He must have spent hours sitting at this very desk, tracing my handwriting, studying the pressure points and the loops until he perfected the signature. The intimate violation of that act felt worse than the missing money. He weaponized my own identity against me. I looked at the date executed on the loan document. 6 months ago. The timeline crystallized in my mind with terrifying clarity. He secured the funds half a year ago and funneled the cash into a hidden account, but he kept the loan current just long enough to orchestrate his exit. He knew the 30-day default notice would trigger a phone call from the bank today. He timed his departure so the impending threat of foreclosure would strike me the exact same day he vanished. He wanted me drowning in immediate, catastrophic debt. He expected me to shatter under the pressure to call him weeping, to ask for his guidance to surrender. The sheer scale of his cruelty demanded a proportionate response. This was no longer a simple domestic dispute over hidden savings. This was federal wire fraud. This was identity theft. This was real estate fraud carrying severe statutory penalties. My corporate auditing skills could trace the digital footprint, but I could not litigate a criminal conspiracy from my home office. To crush this scheme, I needed an apex predator. I needed someone who viewed the law not as an instrument of justice, but as a weapon of total destruction. I needed Camille. She was the most ruthless corporate litigator in Delaware. I knew exactly who to call tomorrow morning to build the cage Derek was about to walk into. But before I could build a legal trap, I needed to understand the current battlefield. I needed to know where Derek went and who was helping him. A man who refuses to organize his own garage does not execute a flawless real estate heist alone. He had accomplices. He needed a place to store his physical belongings before he skipped town. He needed a safe harbor while he waited for my inevitable collapse. My gaze drifted to a framed photograph on the bookshelf. It showed Derek standing next to his sister Megan during a summer barbecue. Megan lived just 40 minutes north. She always harbored a quiet, bitter resentment toward my career and my inheritance. She covered her envy with fake smiles and forced politeness, but the jealousy always simmered just beneath the surface. If Derek needed a place to stash his custom golf clubs and his expensive tech gear while he finalized his escape, Megan would open her door without hesitation. I closed my laptop and grabbed my car keys. The bank could wait until dawn. I had a sister-in-law to visit. The night drive north on Route 1 offered nothing but unbroken stretches of dark asphalt. Leaving the coastal sanctuary of Lewis behind, the landscape shifted into the quiet, agricultural plains that defined central Delaware. My sedan cut through the heavy evening mist while my mind processed the sheer magnitude of the betrayal. I was not mourning the end of a marriage. That grief would perhaps arrive months from now, or perhaps never. Instead, I was dissecting a crime scene. A woman does not discover her signature forged in vintage indigo ink and simply cry. She builds a timeline. Derek had drained 15 years of joint savings. He had leveraged my ancestral land with a toxic secondary loan. He had stolen my physical authentication key. Now, he needed a place to consolidate his resources. My destination was a sprawling suburban subdivision just outside the Dover city limits. The neighborhood was a monument to manufactured perfection. Symmetrical lawns, identical mailboxes, and quiet driveways hiding the usual domestic secrets. Megan lived in a brick facade colonial at the end of a cul-de-sac. She was 3 years older than Derek and possessed a brittle defensive entitlement. She spent her life searching for the path of least resistance to luxury, harboring a quiet, bitter resentment toward anyone who achieved success through actual labor. When Derek and I bought the coastal property, her congratulations sounded like grinding glass. She tolerated me because I funded her brother, but the underlying envy always simmered close to the surface. I parked my vehicle 2 houses down, keeping my headlights off as I pulled against the curb. The glow of a television screen flickered faintly through the downstairs living room window. The porch light was dark. I stepped out into the damp night air. My heels clicked a steady, rhythmic cadence on the concrete sidewalk. I did not pound my fists against the wooden door. I pressed the illuminated doorbell button a single time, folding my hands in front of my coat. The deadbolt slid back with a sharp, metallic clack. The door opened a few inches, stopped by the security chain. Megan peered through the narrow gap. Recognizing my face, she unhooked the chain and pulled the door wide. She wore an oversized cashmere sweater, holding a glass of red wine in her left hand. She arranged her features into a mask of synthetic surprise. "Valerie," she breathed, her pitch rising artificially. "What are you doing here so late? It is almost 10 o'clock. "I am looking for your brother," I stated, keeping my tone perfectly conversational. I took a deliberate step forward, breaching the threshold and forcing her to retreat into the foyer. "Have you seen him tonight?" "Derek." "No." She shook her head, her grip tightening around the stem of her wine glass. "We have not spoken in several weeks." "Why? Did something happen between you two?" While she performed her routine of feigned ignorance, my eyes bypassed her face and swept the entryway. Megan hated clutter. Her foyer was usually barren, featuring only a minimalist console table and a decorative mirror. Yet resting against the baseboard near the coat closet sat a sleek titanium travel bag. Protruding from the unzipped top compartment were the distinctive leather grips of the custom-fitted golf clubs I purchased for Derek on his 40th birthday. Stacked neatly next to the heavy bag were 4 unopened cardboard boxes bearing the logo of a high-end commercial electronics distributor. The shipping labels were obscured, but the packaging clearly indicated heavy-duty server components, high-capacity solid-state drives, commercial-grade routing equipment, the exact hardware a person would require to establish an independent, secure digital network. She was not simply providing a couch for a runaway husband. She was actively hoarding the physical spoils of his heist. She was acting as his quartermaster. "He left a letter," I said, returning my gaze to her face. "He packed his clothes and walked out of the house. I figured he might seek refuge with his family while he figured out his next move." Megan shifted her weight, attempting to block my view of the hallway. She poured fake pity into her expression. "Oh, Valerie, I am truly sorry to hear that. Marriage is just so complicated. Derek always felt a little overshadowed by your intense career. Men need space to figure out their priorities. I am sure he just needs a few days to cool off and clear his head." She was talking far too fast, attempting to fill the quiet void I deliberately maintained. Liars despise silence. They consistently try to suffocate the quiet moments with unnecessary details. "It is just a very stressful environment for everyone right now," she babbled, gesturing vaguely toward the kitchen. "The economy is terrible. The government makes basic survival impossible. I was just reading an article about these annoying new data privacy laws affecting small businesses. The compliance regulations are a regulatory nightmare. If a person wants to start a simple independent consulting firm, it drives people crazy trying to navigate the red tape." I cataloged that specific sentence, instantly locking it into my mental ledger. A suburban homeowner with zero background in corporate digital infrastructure was suddenly complaining about data privacy regulations and small business compliance. The tech boxes sitting in her hallway suddenly made perfect sense. Derek was establishing an independent entity, a shell corporation. He needed to launder the stolen mortgage funds, and he needed a legal structure to process the transactions. He was likely using her residential address to register the limited liability company. She was helping him navigate the incorporation paperwork, making her a willing accessory to a sprawling financial crime. I smiled. It was a cold, calculated expression that caused her nervous babbling to grind to a sudden halt. "You are remarkably perceptive, Megan. Compliance regulations are incredibly strict these days, especially regarding commercial financial transactions. I took a slow, measured step closer. The sweet scent of her floral perfume mingled with the sharp tang of the alcohol on her breath. That is actually why I am not too worried about the letter he left on the counter. I am significantly more concerned about the fraudulent secondary loan he secured against my inherited property. The manufactured pity vanished from her eyes. It was replaced first by genuine confusion, then by a rapid dawning terror. Yes, I continued, my voice remaining smooth and pleasant. Someone forged my signature on the residential equity documents using a very distinct vintage ink. The bank issued a formal default notice this evening. I am meeting with a corporate litigator tomorrow morning to initiate a federal wire fraud investigation. Megan swallowed hard. Her throat bobbed visibly. The blood rushed out of her cheeks, leaving her complexion a splotchy, pale white. She opened her mouth to speak, but her vocal cords refused to produce a sound. The wine glass in her hand trembled, sloshing the dark red liquid against the crystal rim. The authorities will obviously begin by tracing the stolen funds, I explained, tilting my head slightly as if discussing the weather forecast. Then they will subpoena the electronic communications of anyone who assisted in hiding the physical assets. Federal prosecutors are remarkably thorough when pursuing accomplices. They tend to seize homes and freeze bank accounts during the initial discovery phase. It is a very messy, highly public process. I did not wait for a tearful confession. I did not demand to know which room Derek was hiding in. I had accomplished my objective. I planted a deep, toxic seed of paranoia directly into her mind. The alliance between a coward and an opportunist is always fragile. Once the legitimate threat of federal prison enters the equation, familial loyalty dissolves into desperate self-preservation. If Derek happens to call you, I said, turning back toward the open doorway, tell him I am looking forward to the audit. Have a pleasant night, Megan. I walked back down the concrete path, leaving her paralyzed in the foyer. The cool night air cleared the heavy stench of her perfume from my lungs. I slid into the driver's seat of my sedan and started the engine. As I reached for the gear shift, my cell phone illuminated in the center console. A priority security alert flashed across the screen, originating from my shared household cloud drive. Someone was attempting to access the encrypted folders containing my digital signature files. The financial war was escalating faster than I anticipated. The security alert illuminated the dark interior of my sedan. I kept my foot on the brake pedal, staring at the glowing notification on the dashboard screen. Someone was attempting to sync with the household cloud server. Derek was tracking my digital footprint. He was waiting for my reaction, expecting me to lock down the shared network. If I severed his access, he would know I was preparing a defense. A cornered enemy is unpredictable. A complacent enemy makes fatal mistakes. I pulled into a vacant grocery store parking lot and shifted the car into park. I opened my laptop, balancing it against the steering wheel. Instead of changing the administrative passwords, I navigated to the shared digital workspace we used for household expenses. I created a new text document, leaving the title blank. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I needed to feed his ego. I needed to give him the exact reaction he predicted when he wrote that cruel note on the kitchen island. I closed my eyes, channeling every ounce of weakness I could imagine. Then I began to type. Derek, please call me. The bank contacted me tonight about a default notice. I do not understand what is happening with the mortgage. Our savings accounts are empty. I am terrified. I cannot navigate this without you. Whatever went wrong, we can fix it. Please come home. I will forgive everything. I just need my husband. It was a masterpiece of manufactured desperation. I saved the file and left the window open. On my secondary screen, I monitored the network activity logs. 4 minutes later, the document registered a read receipt from a remote device. Derek was watching. He was reading the pathetic plea in real time. I pictured him sitting in some cheap hotel room or perhaps lounging in his sister's guest bedroom, smiling at his own perceived brilliance. He believed he had shattered my spirit. He believed the brilliant compliance auditor was reduced to a weeping, helpless housewife. I closed the laptop and drove home. I slept for 8 undisturbed hours. The next morning, I sat in a high-backed leather chair inside a corner office overlooking the Wilmington riverfront. The room smelled of polished mahogany and expensive espresso. Behind the expansive desk sat Camille. She was 50 years old, with sharp features and a reputation that made rival attorneys settle out of court to avoid facing her in a trial. She did not practice family law. She orchestrated corporate executions. I finished laying out the physical evidence on her desk. The printed banking ledgers, the forged home equity agreement, the internal security logs from my pharmaceutical firm. Camille did not express sympathy. That was why I hired her. She picked up the printed forgery, tracing the dark indigo ink with the tip of a gold pen. "He stole your grandfather's fountain pen to execute a fraudulent notary stamp," she noted, her voice a smooth, measured baritone. "That is a federal offense. Wire fraud carries a statutory maximum of 20 years per count. But the corporate data breach is the real prize, Valerie. If he sells proprietary oncology research, he crosses the threshold into economic espionage." I sipped my black coffee, letting the bitter liquid sharpen my focus. "The Human Resources Department believes he bypassed the secondary firewall using my physical authentication token," I explained. "But corporate IT restricts remote access. To breach the server, he needed to mimic my authorized Internet Protocol address. He had to convince the security software that the login originated from my secure home network. I do not understand how he achieved that without sitting in my actual living room." Camille steepled her fingers, resting her chin against her manicured hands. "He needed a commercial-grade routing system," she suggested, "something capable of establishing a virtual private network tunnel directly into your residential modem." The memory struck me with the force of a physical blow. A year ago, we were sitting in our living room. Derek was pacing behind the sofa, complaining about the wireless connection dropping during his alleged business consulting calls. He insisted we needed a hardware upgrade. He brought home a heavy black router with 4 external antennas. He spent an entire weekend configuring the network settings, restricting my administrative access, claiming he was installing advanced encryption to protect my corporate files. "He built a backdoor," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. 12 months ago. He installed a commercial router in our house to create a permanent remote gateway. He has been planning to steal my identity for a year. The revelation settled over the mahogany office. The betrayal was not a sudden act of desperation. It was a cold, calculated, long game. He sat across from me at the dinner table, smiling and asking about my day, while quietly wiring a digital explosive beneath my career. Camille observed my face, watching the realization harden into pure, tactical resolve. "Most wives would want to file a restraining order today," she stated. "Most wives would want to freeze the remaining credit lines and scream at him in a mediation room." "I am not most wives," I replied, setting my coffee cup on the coaster. "How do we build the trap?" Camille opened a legal pad. "We do not stop him. We encourage him. Criminals who think they have won always get greedy. Right now, he holds $300,000 in stolen equity and 3 terabytes of stolen data. If we freeze his access today, we only catch him for the theft. But if we let him spend the money, the charges multiply." She drew a sharp line down the center of the yellow paper. "Every time he transfers a single dollar of that stolen equity across state lines, it constitutes a new count of federal wire fraud. Every time he uses a stolen dime to purchase a cup of coffee or sign a commercial lease, he engages in money laundering. We want him to feel invincible. We want him to build his new life using a contaminated foundation. Because when the federal marshals finally arrive, they will not just seize the money. They will seize every single asset he purchased with it. I nodded, understanding the architecture of the strategy. He read my pathetic email last night, I told her. He thinks I am paralyzed by fear. He believes he has plenty of time to execute his next move. Perfect, Camille smiled a thin, razor-sharp expression. Let him construct his own prison. Our job is simply to document the bricks. My cell phone vibrated inside my purse, breaking the quiet intensity of the room. It was an encrypted text message from Victor, the head of corporate security at my pharmaceutical firm. He promised to dedicate his best internal forensic technicians to trace the digital footprint of the stolen oncology data. I unlocked the screen and read the message. The text consisted of a single corporate registration document. Victor and his team had successfully tracked the destination of the stolen research files. The data packets were routed through a series of anonymous servers before landing in a private cloud drive registered to a brand new, limited liability company based right here in Delaware. I read the name of the primary shareholder listed on the incorporation paperwork. My breath hitched. What is it? Camille asked, noticing the subtle shift in my posture. I turned the phone around and placed it on the mahogany desk. Derek was not acting as an independent rogue thief. He was acting as a delivery mechanism for a much larger predator. The name on the screen belonged to a disgraced former executive from our biggest pharmaceutical rival. A man who was forced out of the industry 2 years ago for unethical practices. Derek did not just steal my money, I said, staring at the screen. He sold my company's secrets to Nathan. He is attempting to buy his way into a corporate empire. Before Camille could respond, my phone chimed a second time. This message came from a private investigator I retained earlier that morning. It contained a high-resolution photograph taken outside a local upscale restaurant. Derek was sitting at a corner table. He was not meeting with a corporate rival to discuss business. He was leaning across the white linen tablecloth, passionately kissing a much younger woman. The financial war had just collided with a deeply personal betrayal, and the battlefield was expanding faster than either of us anticipated. I stared at the high-resolution image illuminating my mobile screen. The fiscal warfare we had been dissecting for the past hour suddenly collided with a deeply visceral personal violation. Derek was sitting at a corner table inside a dimly lit upscale bistro. He leaned over the crisp white linen tablecloth, pressing his mouth against the lips of a much younger woman. Her blonde hair fell across his shoulder. His hand rested intimately against her neck. The sheer audacity of his public display made my chest tighten. I expected to feel a crushing wave of grief. Instead, a strange clinical detachment settled over my mind. The betrayed wife retreated further into the psychological shadows, allowing the forensic auditor to take absolute control. Camille observed my rigid posture from across the expansive mahogany desk. She did not offer hollow platitudes or sympathetic gestures. The seasoned litigator simply tapped the tip of her gold pen against the printed corporate registry Victor had provided moments earlier. "The affair is a mere distraction, Valerie," she stated, her voice serving as a steady anchor in the swirling chaos. "Infidelity is common. Economic espionage is a masterpiece. We must dismantle the masterpiece first, before addressing the emotional collateral damage." I forced my eyes away from the digital photograph and directed my complete attention back to the incorporation paperwork. The document outlined the formation of a new entity named Apex Solutions Limited Liability Company. It was registered right here in the first state, taking full advantage of the notoriously opaque commercial privacy laws that defined our local economy. Delaware offered a perfect structural sanctuary for individuals attempting to mask illicit wealth. The corporate-friendly environment shielded the identities of beneficial owners behind layers of administrative bureaucracy. But no fortress is entirely impenetrable if you possess the original architectural blueprints. I traced the name of the primary shareholder listed on the operating agreement. Nathan. The syllables tasted bitter on my tongue, bringing forth a flood of industry history. 3 years ago, Nathan operated as a senior vice president at a massive rival pharmaceutical conglomerate headquartered just across the river. He was notorious for an aggressive, ruthless management style, until an internal audit exposed his habit of manipulating clinical trial data to artificially inflate stock prices. He avoided federal prosecution by quietly resigning and signing a draconian non-disclosure agreement. The industry subsequently blacklisted him. He became a corporate ghost, entirely exiled from the lucrative world of biomedical research. Now the ghost was attempting a resurrection. The disparate pieces of the conspiracy snapped together, forming a terrifying mosaic. Derek possessed zero background in biomedical engineering or oncology. He could not interpret the complex cellular compound data he pilfered from my employer. But Nathan could. Nathan possessed the scientific vocabulary and the black market industry contacts required to monetize 3 terabytes of classified proprietary research. Derek is not the architect of this operation, I whispered, tracing the sequence of financial transactions on the polished wood surface. He is a delivery mechanism. Camille nodded slowly, adjusting her reading glasses. He needed a method to buy into Nathan and his new operation. A disgraced former executive does not partner with a residential construction contractor out of charity. Nathan demanded substantial upfront capital to build the infrastructure for Apex Solutions. The empty joint savings accounts and the fraudulent $300,000 home equity loan suddenly made perfect, horrifying sense. Derek did not steal my money to fund a romantic tropical getaway. He used my ancestral inheritance to purchase a lucrative partnership stake in the Shell Company. He was laundering the purloined funds through the initial capitalization of the new firm. I pulled out a fresh legal pad and began diagramming the cash flow. Derek transfers the illicit property equity into a hidden commercial checking account. He drafts a legitimate-looking investment contract to purchase restricted shares in Nathan and his newly formed entity. The Shell Company then utilizes that clean capital to acquire commercial real estate or independent medical testing facilities, creating a pristine paper trail. The stolen pharmaceutical data is quietly integrated into these new facilities, completely masking its true origin. It was a sophisticated cycle of money laundering, explicitly designed to transform stolen intellectual property into legitimate corporate assets. I leaned back in the heavy leather chair, exhaling a slow, measured breath. My husband had spent 15 years complaining about balancing our monthly household budget. He feigned absolute numerical ignorance whenever tax season arrived, forcing me to manage every single detail of our financial existence. That incompetence was a carefully crafted illusion. Beneath the facade of a lazy suburban husband lurked a man capable of executing a multi-tiered federal crime. He weaponized my own trust to fund his criminal metamorphosis. My gaze drifted back to the cellular device resting on the corner of the desk. The screen had gone dark, but the image of the blonde woman remained burned into my consciousness. I unlocked the phone and enlarged the surveillance photograph provided by my private investigator. I studied the background details, deliberately ignoring the intimate embrace. The restaurant featured distinctive exposed brick walls and Edison bulb lighting. I recognized the establishment immediately. It was a high-end steakhouse located directly in the center of the Dover Business District. Why would Derek risk a public appearance in a prominent political hub while simultaneously orchestrating a massive corporate heist. It was a calculated risk that implied a deep, dangerous sense of arrogant invincibility. He truly believed he had left me completely paralyzed. I zoomed in on the young woman. She appeared to be in her late 20s. She wore a tailored navy blue blazer over a crisp silk blouse. Her posture was rigidly professional despite the romantic context of the photograph. Resting on the edge of the table near her left elbow was a thick manila folder. It was not a menu. It was a stack of legal-sized documents bound by a heavy brass clip. As I analyzed the visual evidence, the investigator sent a follow-up encrypted text message. The transmission contained a brief preliminary dossier on the unidentified woman. I opened the digital file, fully preparing to read the standard tragic biography of a naive mistress who fell for an older married man. The first line of the report hit me like a physical strike to the sternum. Her name was Kelsey. She was 28 years old. She held a current, active license as a registered commercial real estate agent in the state of Delaware. My mind raced back to the fraudulent secondary loan document sitting in my secure email inbox. I remembered the distinct circular notary stamp pressed into the paper directly beside my forged signature. The emblem belonged to a Delaware notary public, registered to a commercial real estate firm. The oxygen in the mahogany office felt suddenly thin. I stared at the photograph, viewing the romantic embrace through an entirely new lens. Derek was not simply enjoying an illicit affair. He was celebrating a successful illegal transaction. The woman sitting across from him was not just a naive romantic partner. She was the vital mechanical cog in his criminal machine. The betrayal was infinitely deeper than a stolen kiss. The financial warfare and the broken marriage were not separate tragedies. They were the exact same weapon pointing directly at my chest. I kept my eyes locked on the illuminated pixels of my cellular screen. The blonde hair falling across her shoulder. The tailored navy blazer projecting synthetic professionalism. The legal folder resting against her elbow. Kelsey, a 28-year-old commercial property agent. My brain instantly retrieved the digital scan of the fraudulent secondary loan currently sitting in my secure inbox. I pictured the circular blue emblem pressed into the digital paper directly beside my forged signature, the commission number, the registered address. My fingertips struck the keyboard of the guest terminal resting on Camille and her mahogany desk. I accessed the Delaware State Database for Public Notaries. I typed the 7-digit commission number into the search bar. The government server churned for a fraction of a second before displaying the matching record. The registered notary public was Kelsey Monroe. Her business address matched a boutique commercial real estate firm in downtown Dover. The temperature in the office seemed to drop. Derek had not merely stumbled into a clandestine romance to escape a stagnant marriage. He had purposefully recruited a certified state official to execute a financial felony. The woman kissing my husband across the white linen tablecloth was the exact same person who stamped the fraudulent document stealing my ancestral home. The intimacy of their embrace was cemented by mutual treason. I needed to understand the architectural framework of her involvement. Was this young woman a naive accessory, blinded by his manipulative charm, or a willing conspirator engineering the fraud? I bypassed the standard public records and logged into a proprietary investigative registry I utilized during intensive corporate audits. The software pulled deep demographic data, financial histories, and familial associations. I entered her full legal name. The progress bar crept across the monitor. I listened to the steady ticking of the antique grandfather clock standing in the corner of the room. The rhythmic sound anchored my focus, pushing the rising tide of adrenaline back down into my chest. The query results populated the screen. Kelsey Monroe possessed a clean criminal record and a modest credit history. She graduated from a local university 5 years ago with a degree in business administration. Her employment history showed a rapid ascent through the local property markets. She specialized in high-value coastal acquisitions. Nothing appeared overtly suspicious upon initial inspection. She looked like a standard, ambitious young professional chasing lucrative commissions. But a seasoned auditor never stops at the surface layer. Secrets always hide in the secondary connections. I clicked the tab labeled Familial Associations. The algorithm mapped her immediate relatives, cross-referencing public tax filings and shared residential addresses. The family tree expanded across the monitor in a sprawling web of interconnected names. Her mother was a retired public school teacher. Her father passed away a decade ago. I scanned the secondary branches, looking for aunts, uncles, and siblings. My eyes locked onto the maternal uncle. The breath caught in my throat. I read the name 3 times to ensure the glowing letters were not playing a cruel trick on my vision. The maternal uncle was Nathan, the disgraced former executive from the rival pharmaceutical conglomerate, the primary shareholder of the newly formed shell company Apex Solutions, the man purchasing the stolen oncology research. The disparate puzzle pieces forcefully shifted, rearranging the entire landscape of the conspiracy. Derek believed he was the brilliant mastermind of a flawless heist. He thought he was seducing a beautiful young real estate agent to secure a compliant notary for his forged mortgage. He thought he was using her to build his new empire. He was profoundly wrong. Kelsey and Nathan were using him. Derek was nothing more than a disposable, foolish mule. Nathan needed an inside man to steal the proprietary compound data from my firm. He could not breach our firewalls externally. He deployed his own niece to groom my arrogant husband. They analyzed Derek and recognized his fatal flaw, his fragile ego. They stroked his pride, encouraged his deep-seated resentment toward my successful career, and provided the logistical framework for the theft. They handed him the blueprint to destroy me, making him feel like a conqueror. Once Derek transferred the stolen funds and delivered the classified research, they would inevitably discard him. They built a trap within a trap. Derek was marching toward his own execution, wearing a blindfold woven from his own narcissism. A sudden sharp ache bloomed behind my ribs. It was the phantom pain of a murdered history. For 15 years, I had shared a bed with a man whose pride was so fragile, he allowed himself to be manipulated into destroying his own life just to feel superior to his wife. I felt a fleeting urge to weep for the hollow shell of our existence. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of polished wood and bitter espresso. I visualized a heavy steel vault door inside my mind. I placed the grief, the humiliation, and the broken vows inside that vault. I swung the door shut and engaged the heavy locking mechanism. Emotion was a liability in this room. Logic was the only weapon capable of winning this war. I turned my attention back to the financial ledger. Derek had $300,000 in liquid cash sitting in a hidden commercial account. Apex Solutions possessed the stolen clinical trials, but the money was still dirty. They needed to scrub the funds through a legitimate transaction to sever the digital paper trail connecting the cash to my forged home equity line. Why involve a commercial real estate agent unless the ultimate goal involved acquiring physical property? The Delaware coast offered a lucrative haven for anonymous cash buyers. I opened a new search window accessing the regional multiple listing service. I filtered the parameters for luxury commercial and residential properties in the specific coastal zip codes currently marked as pending sale. I cross-referenced the listing agents against the name Kelsey Monroe. The database processed the request and returned a single solitary match. It was a luxury waterfront townhouse located in the highly coveted enclave of Rehoboth Beach. The architectural photos displayed floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, providing a pristine facade for a nascent corporate entity. The asking price was exactly $300,000. The property was listed as an expedited cash transaction. I pulled the preliminary public tax records for the parcel directly from the county assessor portal. The buyer of record was listed as Apex Solutions Limited Liability Company. The brilliant simplicity of their laundering scheme became crystal clear, illuminating the true depth of Nathan and his corporate spite. Derek and Kelsey were using the stolen mortgage funds to purchase the townhouse in full, avoiding the scrutiny of traditional mortgage underwriting. Once the transaction cleared escrow, the illicit cash would transform into an untraceable real estate asset owned exclusively by the shell company. The property title would be legally clean, washing the fraud away. The dirty money would vanish into the local property market, providing Apex Solutions with a legitimate headquarters to begin selling the stolen oncology research. I checked the status of the escrow account through the secure state banking portal. The transaction was already in the final funding stage. The closing was scheduled for this very afternoon. Derek and his mistress were likely sitting in a premium title office right now, sipping sparkling water, celebrating their victory while preparing to sign the final binding documents. They were hours away from finalizing the heist and rendering the stolen funds practically untouchable. I looked across the wide desk at Camille. The seasoned litigator read the severity in my posture. She picked up her desk phone and began dialing her most ruthless federal banking contacts. We had to construct an impenetrable legal wall before the ink dried on those closing papers. The clock was no longer ticking. It was hammering. The antique clock in the corner of the law office marked the passing seconds with a heavy metallic rhythm. Camille had her fingers poised over the keypad of her desk phone, ready to initiate the sequence that would freeze the escrow account. Before she could dial the first digit, my mobile device vibrated against the polished mahogany surface. The screen displayed a secure, encrypted channel originating from the Wilmington Pharmaceutical headquarters. Victor was calling. I held up a hand, signaling the litigator to wait. I accepted the connection and placed the audio on the central speaker. Valerie, we have a new variable. Victor stated, his voice transmitting with crisp digital clarity. Diane and I need you to authorize a secure video link immediately. Something just hit the regulatory compliance desk. I tapped the secondary icon on my screen, converting the audio feed into a high-definition visual stream. The tablet illuminated, revealing Victor and the Human Resources Director sitting side by side in the same sterile glass boardroom where my week had begun. Diane held a single sheet of printed paper. Her expression lacked the cold, accusatory edge from our previous encounter. Instead, she looked profoundly amused. 10 minutes ago, the Delaware Corporate Ethics Board received a whistleblower submission, Diane explained, resting the paper on the table. The complaint alleges that you have been coercing our regional logistics vendors. The author claims you demand a 10% kickback on all distribution contracts in exchange for favorable compliance audits. I processed the accusation. It was a calculated lie, designed to sound plausible to an outside regulatory agency. Derek had absorbed just enough terminology during our 15 years of marriage to construct a dangerous fiction. He knew vendor extortion would trigger an automatic suspension of my employment, pending a lengthy internal review. He read my email, I said, looking across the desk at Camille. I fed him a fabricated message begging for reconciliation. It inflated his ego. He thinks I am sitting at home weeping over our broken marriage. He filed this complaint to deliver the final, lethal strike against my career. Derek always possessed a dangerous combination of unearned confidence and profound impatience. During his early years operating a residential construction firm, he routinely lost lucrative contracts because he refused to read the municipal zoning addendums. He viewed fine print as an insult to his intelligence. He assumed his natural charm could pave over any structural mistakes. He carried that exact same arrogance into his criminal enterprise. He believed a simple, anonymous web form would detonate my professional life. He underestimated the environment I operated in. The author utilized a proxy server to mask their digital point of origin. Victor noted, leaning closer to the camera lens. They routed the submission through an encrypted network stationed overseas. A standard human resources department would simply accept the anonymity and begin the investigative protocol. Victor smiled. It was a subtle predatory shift in his usual stoic demeanor. But this firm is currently operating under a classified internal threat protocol, Victor continued. When the system flagged your name, my cyber forensics division intercepted the data packet before it reached the external ethics board. A proxy server merely bounces a signal. It does not erase the initial digital footprint if you possess the algorithmic tools to trace it backward. The security chief tapped a command into his own terminal. A secondary file materialized in my secure inbox. I opened the document. It contained a raw data log detailing a sequence of numerical identifiers. My technicians unwound the proxy chain, Victor said. The primary signal originated from a commercial broadband router located in downtown Dover. We matched the numerical sequence against the public utility registries. The address attached to the router belongs to Apex Solutions. Diane added, her tone sharpening into a weaponized corporate edge. The room fell into a pristine, heavy silence. Derek had attempted to orchestrate my professional termination while sitting inside the very shell company he built with my stolen inheritance. He thought he was throwing a hidden dagger. In reality, he had just illuminated his exact coordinates for an incoming aerial strike. Camille leaned into the visual frame of the video conference. Her eyes gleamed with the unique satisfaction of a predator watching her prey walk willingly into a steel snare. Victor, this is Camille, she said, introducing herself without unnecessary pleasantries. Does the pharmaceutical firm consider a fraudulent ethics complaint filed from a hostile corporate entity to be actionable interference? Diane answered before the security chief could speak. We consider it an explicit act of corporate sabotage. Then the anonymous tip is the greatest gift your adversary could have possibly delivered, Camille stated, folding her hands on the mahogany desk. By utilizing the Apex Solutions network to file a defamatory attack against a senior auditor, he pierced his own corporate veil. A judge would normally require weeks of complex evidentiary hearings to grant a subpoena against a newly formed limited liability company. The litigator tapped her gold pen against the desk. But Derek just provided unquestionable probable cause. He linked his anonymous extortion claim directly to the server housing your stolen oncology data. We no longer have to request permission to investigate his finances. Your corporate legal department now has the statutory right to compel the immediate release of every single email, text message, and financial transaction flowing through Apex Solutions. Derek had essentially handed the keys to his criminal kingdom directly to my employer. His desperate need to assert dominance caused him to commit a fatal tactical error. He bypassed the complex security measures Nathan had likely installed and acted on pure, vindictive impulse. Valerie Diane spoke, her voice drawing my attention back to the high-definition screen. Your ability to navigate this crisis without a single misstep is remarkable. You mapped the internal data breach, identified the external host, and managed the subsequent fallout with a level of precision this firm desperately requires. The human resources director paused, locking eyes with me through the digital feed. The executive board held an emergency session this morning regarding the oncology leak. We require a leader who does not flinch when the foundation shakes. Effective immediately, the firm is promoting you to Senior Director of Compliance. I absorbed the title change. It was a role I had worked toward for 7 years. Achieving it under these surreal circumstances felt strange, but I recognized the strategic value of the promotion. It was not just a reward. It was a transfer of corporate power. Along with the new title comes a new operating budget. Diane continued confirming my tactical assessment. You are officially authorized to utilize the full scope of our internal legal division. We are dispatching a team of corporate attorneys to assist Camille. They will draft the federal subpoenas against Apex Solutions today. We are going to dismantle that shell company brick by brick. Thank you, Diane, I replied, my voice projecting the cool, decisive authority the new rank demanded. Tell the legal team to prepare the filings, but tell them to hold the execution until I give the explicit command. Victor narrowed his eyes. Why delay the strike? Because we have a specific sequence to follow, I explained. Breaking the connection to the corporate headquarters, I lowered the screen of my tablet, placing it gently onto the desk. The pharmaceutical firm provided the heavy artillery required to crush Nathan and his illicit enterprise. The subpoenas would rip through the shell company, exposing the stolen compound data and ensuring Derek faced decades in a federal penitentiary. His vindictive, anonymous tip had secured his ultimate ruin. But the corporate vengeance had to wait. A larger, immediate threat loomed on the horizon. I turned my attention back to Camille. The seasoned attorney was already picking up her desk phone, her fingers hovering over the keypad once again. The intricate web of lies, the forged signature, the corporate espionage, and the stolen inheritance all funneled down to a single geographic coordinate on the Delaware coast. Derek and Kelsey were currently sitting inside a title office. They were surrounded by polished mahogany and leather chairs similar to the ones in this very room. They were holding pens, preparing to sign the closing documents for the luxury waterfront townhouse. They believed they were moments away from transforming $300,000 of stolen residential equity into an untraceable, pristine asset. We had dismantled his anonymous tip. We had secured the corporate subpoenas. We had identified the mistress and the disgraced executive. Now, we had to stop the money. Camille? I said, checking the digital readout on my watch. We have less than 4 hours before the banking institutions close the wire transfer window. The litigator pressed the dial button, initiating the call to her federal financial regulators. Let us show your husband what a real audit looks like, she replied. The final race to the Rehoboth Beach closing table had officially begun. The digital clock resting on the mahogany desk displayed exactly 12 noon. 240 minutes remained before the federal wire transfer window closed for the weekend. Down on the southern edge of the state, Rehoboth Beach gleamed under the bright midday sun. The coastal town served as a luxurious playground for wealthy executives and political elites seeking refuge from the urban sprawl. It boasted pristine boardwalks and multi-million-dollar waterfront estates. For a man attempting to launder illicit funds, the affluent community offered the perfect facade of legitimate prosperity. Derek pulled his luxury rental sedan into the paved lot of a boutique real estate title agency. The salty ocean breeze ruffled his hair as he stepped onto the hot pavement. He adjusted the lapels of his new tailored suit. Kelsey walked beside him wearing a designer silk dress that mirrored the deep blue waves crashing a few blocks away. They looked like a triumphant couple preparing to purchase their dream home. They possessed the arrogant swagger of thieves who believed they had successfully outrun the consequences of their actions. 90 miles north, I sat perfectly still inside the Wilmington law office. The atmosphere crackled with controlled voltage. Camille engaged the speakerphone connecting our room to a secure conference line containing 3 senior attorneys from my pharmaceutical employer. We were not merely drafting a standard divorce injunction. We were assembling a multi-jurisdictional federal strike. To freeze an escrow account holding hundreds of thousands of dollars requires a staggering burden of proof. The The courts protect real estate transactions from frivolous interference, ensuring the smooth operation of the local economy. We needed an ex parte order, a specialized judicial ruling granted without notifying the opposing party. The legal threshold demanded undeniable evidence of imminent, irreparable financial harm. I slid the electronic tablet toward Camille. The screen displayed the compiled dossier, the forged secondary loan document containing the distinct indigo ink, the commercial internet protocol logs tracing the corporate data theft to the Dover Shell Company, the unmasked proxy server data exposing Derek as the author of the defamatory ethics complaint. It was a flawless architectural blueprint of a sprawling felony. Inside the Coastal Title Agency, a receptionist guided Derek and Kelsey into a plush conference room. The space featured walls constructed of frosted glass and a long, polished granite table. A chilled bottle of expensive champagne rested inside a silver bucket, waiting to commemorate the impending transaction. The escrow officer entered, carrying a thick stack of legal-sized paper. She smiled warmly, entirely unaware she was facilitating a criminal money laundering operation. Derek sat in a plush leather chair, crossing his legs with practiced ease. He accepted a crystal flute filled with bubbling wine. He toasted his young mistress, whispering quiet promises of an opulent future. He pictured me, 90 miles away, sitting inside a cubicle drowning in sudden debt and weeping over his cruel departure note. His ego demanded a helpless victim. He constructed a fiction where he emerged as a brilliant rogue tactician. He failed to comprehend that I was currently guiding a legal missile directly toward his chest. Camille initiated a secure video conference with a Chancery Court judge. The magistrate appeared on the monitor, looking stern and weary. He demanded a concise explanation for the emergency interruption of his afternoon docket. Camille did not employ emotional rhetoric. She delivered a surgical presentation of the facts. She detailed the forged notary stamp. She outlined the illicit transfer of my ancestral inheritance into a commercial holding account. The corporate attorneys chimed in, confirming the impending threat to classified proprietary oncology research. The judge reviewed the digital files in silence. The heavy ticking of the antique clock in our office amplified the mounting tension. I watched the seconds fall away. 1 hour remained until the banking grid severed its daily connections. If the judge hesitated, Derek would secure the waterfront property. The illicit cash would vanish into the opaque secondary real estate market, transforming into a pristine corporate asset owned by his disgraced partner. Kelsey harbored her own hidden agenda beneath her polished exterior. She was not merely a romantic accessory. She was the niece of a banished corporate titan. She viewed this transaction as a proving ground to demonstrate her value to her Uncle Nathan. She wanted a seat at the table of his new empire. She looked at Derek not with admiration, but with cold, calculating utility. He was merely the disposable mule, carrying the heavy bags of stolen cash across the finish line. Derek retrieved a sleek metal pen from his suit pocket. The escrow officer pushed the first stack of binding documents across the granite table. The deed of trust, the ownership transfer registry, the title insurance waivers. Derek signed his name with large, sweeping strokes. His hand did not tremble. His conscience registered zero hesitation. He was formally committing his stolen capital to the corporate entity managed by Apex Solutions. Kelsey signed her portion, acting as the authorized representative for the Shell Company. Her signature locked the final mechanical gear of their laundering machine into place. The escrow officer gathered the executed contracts. She logged into her secure banking terminal, preparing to authorize the final disbursement of funds from the holding account to the property seller. Derek leaned back, sipping his champagne, anticipating the glorious confirmation of his newfound wealth. He checked his luxury wristwatch, smiling at the perfect timing of his triumph. In Wilmington, the Chancery judge finished reading the Forensic Internet Protocol report exposing the anonymous ethics complaint. He looked up into the camera lens. His expression hardened into a mask of judicial fury. A judge might tolerate a domestic financial dispute, but they despise individuals who weaponize state regulatory agencies to commit corporate extortion. He did not ask any further questions. The magistrate typed his digital signature onto the emergency injunction order. The execution mandate uploaded instantly into the federal banking registry. Camille terminated the video call and immediately dialed the direct compliance hotline for the specific financial institution managing the Rehoboth Beach escrow account. She bypassed the standard customer service representatives, utilizing her specialized litigator credentials to reach the senior fraud prevention desk. "I need an immediate hard freeze on a commercial escrow disbursement," Camille instructed, her voice carrying the undeniable authority of a court mandate. "The transaction involves Apex Solutions. The federal injunction is currently loading into your compliance queue." I watched the digital progress bar on my tablet monitor the exact status of the targeted bank account. The system refreshed. The balance icon shifted from a green active status, indicating available funds, to a flashing red suspension warning. Derek reached across the granite table to pour another glass of champagne. He felt the warm coastal sun shining through the frosted glass windows. He believed his meticulous, year-long plan had finally reached its glorious conclusion. He thought he had outsmarted his wife, his in-laws, and the entire Delaware corporate banking system. He had no idea the invisible guillotine was already dropping. The next 60 seconds would systematically dismantle his entire universe, exposing him to a level of public humiliation he could never possibly anticipate. The frosted glass walls of the Rehoboth Beach Title Agency offered a false sense of security. Inside the premium conference room, Derek leaned back in his plush leather chair, swirling the expensive vintage champagne inside his crystal flute. He felt the warm coastal sunlight illuminating his tailored suit. He looked across the polished granite table at Kelsey. Her blonde hair caught the ambient light, projecting the pristine image of a successful corporate partner. Derek smiled a wide, arrogant expression that crinkled the corners of his eyes. He believed he had orchestrated a flawless victory. Growing up in a working-class neighborhood where social status was measured by leased vehicles and counterfeit designer watches, Derek spent his entire life chasing the illusion of opulence. He craved the undeniable respect that accompanied vast wealth. Today, he was purchasing a premium waterfront estate using $300,000 of stolen capital. He had successfully bypassed the grueling decades of labor required to earn such a prize. He thought he was a tactical genius. "I bet she is sitting in her cubicle right now," he laughed, taking a long sip of the sparkling wine. "Valerie is probably crying over her spreadsheets, trying to figure out how she will afford groceries this week. She always thought she was so much smarter than everyone else. I shattered her perfect little world. She has nothing left." 90 miles north, I sat in a mahogany chair, watching his financial execution render in real time. My laptop screen displayed the secure clearinghouse interface provided by Camille and her federal regulatory connections. The digital display updated every 5 seconds, refreshing the status of the targeted escrow account. I was not crying. I was not sitting in a cubicle. I was orchestrating a surgical strike against a man who mistook my silent patience for profound weakness. The federal injunction uploaded into the National Banking Registry. The transmission sequence required exactly 10 seconds to propagate across the various institutional servers. I watched a green operational icon pulse on the screen. Then the color shifted. A stark crimson warning bar materialized across the digital dashboard. The court mandate had intercepted the routing numbers. The trap snapped shut. The stolen ancestral inheritance was now locked inside a judicial vault. Down on the coast, the escrow officer smiled at Derek. She was a seasoned professional who handled dozens of luxury property transfers every month. She typed a sequence of commands into her proprietary banking software, preparing to release the funds to the seller. "Everything looks perfect, Mr. Butler," she stated, pressing the final execution key on her keyboard. "We will just wait for the clearance confirmation and hand you the keys to your new home." Derek raised his glass toward Kelsey, celebrating the incoming validation. The computer monitor on the desk emitted a sharp, discordant beep. The escrow officer frowned, adjusting her reading glasses. She clicked the mouse a second time. The machine produced another harsh rejection tone. A large gray error dialog box populated her screen. "That is unusual," she murmured, tapping the refresh button. "The network is returning a hard stop error on the wire transfer. Let me ping the central routing desk to clear the bottleneck." Derek lowered his flute. The smug satisfaction faded from his features, replaced by a microscopic flicker of annoyance. He hated administrative delays. He demanded seamless service to match his newly acquired elite status. "Just run it again," he ordered, waving his hand dismissively. "The funds are sitting right there. I checked the balance this morning." The officer typed a secondary authorization code. The system locked entirely. The screen flashed a high-priority compliance warning. She read the text, and her professional demeanor vanished. She looked up at Derek with an expression of deep, unvarnished alarm. "Sir," she said, her voice dropping an octave, "the bank is refusing the transfer. The account routing numbers have been flagged by a federal chancery court order. The holding account is frozen pending an active fraud investigation." Kelsey stiffened in her chair. The young real estate agent understood the lethal implications of a federal asset freeze. Her uncle Nathan required clean, untraceable capital to launch the illicit pharmaceutical shell company. A frozen escrow account meant the money was contaminated. It meant law enforcement was watching. "That is impossible," Derek snapped, standing up so quickly his chair rolled backward and struck the frosted glass wall. "Run the sequence again. Call your manager. There is a clerical error. I possess $300,000 in that specific trust." "I cannot bypass a judicial lock," the officer replied, pulling her hands away from the keyboard as if the plastic keys were suddenly burning hot. "We need to clear the incidental closing fees for the title search before I can even close this file. That will be $4,200. We can settle that while you contact your financial institution to resolve the larger injunction." Derek reached into his suit jacket, pulling out a premium platinum credit card. He tossed the plastic onto the granite table. The metallic card clattered against the stone surface. "Process the incidental fees," he demanded, his face flushing a deep, angry red. "Then get your regional director on the phone. You are ruining my closing." The officer picked up the platinum card and slid it through the desktop payment terminal. The machine whirred for 3 seconds. A receipt printed, featuring a single word printed in bold black ink. "Declined." She handed the card back. "The issuer rejected the transaction, sir." Derek snatched the plastic from her fingers. He opened his leather wallet and withdrew a different card. This one was tied to his corporate expense account. He shoved it toward the terminal. "Try the Visa," he growled. The officer swiped the second card. The machine returned the exact same result. Declined. She slid a third card. Denied. Every single revolving credit line Derek possessed was linked to the primary domestic accounts I had legally severed through the emergency injunction. His financial ecosystem was entirely interconnected. By freezing the central routing hub, Camille and I had triggered a cascading failure across his entire fiscal identity. In less than 60 seconds, a man who believed he was an unstoppable corporate conqueror was reduced to a penniless liability, unable to purchase a cup of coffee. The commotion in the conference room attracted the attention of the agency director. A tall, imposing man, wearing a conservative gray suit, stepped through the glass doorway. He glanced at the error message glowing on the computer monitor. He noted the string of declined receipts scattered across the granite table. He looked at Derek, and his polite hospitality evaporated. Mr. Butler, the director, said, utilizing a firm, uncompromising tone, "This agency cannot facilitate a transaction utilizing federally contested funds. You are currently in default of your closing obligations. We must terminate this appointment immediately." Derek slammed his hands onto the table. "Do you know who I am?" he shouted, his voice echoing through the quiet coastal office. "I am acquiring this entire block. You are making a catastrophic mistake." "I know that your accounts are seized by a chancery judge," the director countered, gesturing toward the exit. "I suggest you contact a defense attorney. Please vacate the premises. If you refuse to leave, I will summon the local authorities to escort you off the property." The threat of police intervention pierced Derek and his arrogant delusion. The lobby outside the conference room was filled with wealthy clients, real estate brokers, and administrative staff. Every single person stopped their conversations to watch the unfolding spectacle. Derek grabbed his suit jacket, his face burning with profound humiliation. He marched out of the room past the staring crowds. He was a fraud, stripped of his disguise, standing naked in the center of the very society he desperately wanted to join. Kelsey followed him, her expression radiating pure, cold fury. She did not offer a comforting touch. She did not whisper reassuring words. She recognized the scent of a sinking ship, and she was already calculating her escape route. They burst through the heavy glass doors into the sweltering afternoon heat. The paved parking lot offered no sanctuary. Derek paced frantically beside his luxury rental sedan. His breathing turned shallow and rapid. The illusion of his genius was shattered. He needed to reassert dominance. He needed to prove he was still the architect of his own destiny. Panic is a potent poison. It overrides logic and demands immediate, reckless action. He pulled his cellular phone from his pocket. His hands shook as he scrolled through his digital contacts. He bypassed the expensive defense attorneys who required hefty upfront retainers he no longer possessed. Instead, he located the number of a cheap discount litigator he met at a municipal networking event years ago. He pressed the call button. He was going to file an emergency countersuit. He was going to demand half of my inherited poultry farm land, claiming our assets were intertwined. He thought a frivolous legal threat would intimidate me into dropping the asset freeze. He had no idea that filing a formal financial claim required submitting sworn income disclosures to a federal magistrate. Standing in the hot coastal parking lot, humiliated and desperate, my husband prepared to commit blatant perjury. He was about to hand me the final heavy stone required to sink his entire life. The heavy oak doors of the Wilmington law firm swung inward. A uniformed courier stepped into the quiet sanctuary of the corner office, holding a thick manila envelope. He required a signature. Camille signed the digital ledger and took possession of the package. She noted the official seal of the Sussex County Family Court stamped across the exterior paper. The return address did not list a licensed legal practice. It listed a budget motel located on the outskirts of Dover. The discount litigator Derek, attempted to hire in the title agency parking lot, evidently refused to work for free. When his credit cards bounced and the required retainer failed to materialize, the cheap lawyer walked away. A rational human being facing federal scrutiny would retreat into silence and seek a public defender. My husband chose a different path. Driven by sheer, untreated arrogance, he decided to represent himself. He became a pro se litigant, entering a complex legal battlefield armed with nothing but inflated confidence and a handful of forms printed from a public library computer. Camille sliced the envelope open with a silver letter opener. She extracted a stack of poorly formatted documents and spread them across the mahogany surface. I leaned forward, analyzing the text. The margins were crooked, the legal citations were archaic and entirely irrelevant to Delaware property statutes, but the core demand was glaringly clear. Derek was formally petitioning the court for an emergency redistribution of marital assets. He wanted my family legacy. He was demanding 50% ownership of the coastal poultry farm I inherited from my grandfather. The land consisted of several hundred acres of flat, sandy soil stretching toward the Atlantic coastline. My grandfather spent 5 decades working that soil, building a sustainable agricultural enterprise through relentless physical labor and unyielding discipline. It was a testament to endurance. Derek viewed it merely as a giant casino chip. He claimed the inherited real estate was a commingled asset because he once used our joint checking account to purchase a replacement blade for a riding lawnmower 7 years ago. He argued the single negligible maintenance expense granted him equal equity in a multi-million-dollar coastal parcel. He believed this hostile legal posture would intimidate me. He assumed I would panic at the prospect of losing my ancestral land and immediately agree to lift the escrow injunction to make his lawsuit disappear. He was treating the judicial system like a poker game trying to bluff a woman holding a royal flush. I stared at the crooked type on the legal petition. I looked at the signature line bearing his looping, messy handwriting. A strange sound broke the immaculate silence of the corner office. It started as a low breath in my chest and evolved into genuine, unrestrained laughter. I leaned back in the heavy leather chair and laughed until my ribs ached. It was not a sound of despair. It was the pure, bright sound of profound relief. Camille watched me, her sharp features softening into a rare, genuine smile. She understood the exact source of my amusement. "He just handed us the rope," she stated, tapping her gold pen against the sworn affidavit attached to the back of his petition. In the first state, any individual filing a civil claim for marital asset distribution must submit a mandatory financial disclosure under penalty of perjury. The court requires a comprehensive accounting of all global assets, income streams, liquid capital, and business interests. You cannot demand someone else expose their wealth while keeping your own vaults locked. The law demands total fiscal transparency. I pulled his financial disclosure form across the desk. Derek had filled out the boxes with a cheap blue ballpoint pen. He listed his income as negligible. He declared 0 liquid cash. He claimed he possessed no stocks, bonds, or investment vehicles. He checked the box indicating he held no ownership stake in any domestic or foreign commercial entities. He deliberately omitted Nathan. He erased his partnership in Apex Solutions. He hid the $300,000 of stolen equity currently sitting frozen in the Rehoboth Beach escrow account. He failed to mention the 3 terabytes of classified oncology research he purloined from my employer. Right at the bottom of the page, resting just below his fabricated poverty narrative, was a stark, black warning printed in bold typography. "I declare, under penalty of federal and state perjury statutes, that the foregoing information is true and correct." By signing that specific line and filing it with the county clerk, Derek crossed an irreversible threshold. Wire fraud was a severe financial crime, but lying to a judge on a sworn document to extort property elevated his conduct to a direct assault on the judicial process. He had just committed felony perjury. I stood up and walked toward the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the bustling cityscape. The corporate law offices and banking headquarters sprawling below represented order, logic, and structure. I spent my entire career mastering the intricate rules that governed this environment. Derek despised those rules. He always sought the shortcut, the hidden back door, the unearned advantage. His entire criminal scheme relied on the assumption that I would collapse under the emotional weight of his sudden departure. He never factored in the possibility that I would weaponize my grief and channel it into a forensic investigation. The counter-discovery motion, resting on Camille and her desk, was the ultimate expression of that transformation. It was a silent, precise weapon, forged from data and sworn testimony. "We do not need to fight this petition," Camille instructed, her voice dropping to a low tactical register. "We accept it. We allow his perjury to enter the official public record. Once the ink dries on the court ledger, his sworn lies become indisputable evidence." She drafted a rapid response, pulling a standard counter-discovery motion from her digital archives. The document formally acknowledged his lawsuit and legally bound him to the financial declarations he just submitted. "Sign this," she directed, sliding the crisp white paper toward me. I picked up my own pen. The weight of the instrument felt perfect in my grip. I signed my name with sharp, deliberate strokes. The ink flowed smoothly, securing his undeniable legal doom. I was no longer just a victim of a stolen mortgage. I was the architect of his impending incarceration. I slid the signed motion back to the litigator. "File it," I commanded. "Let the court recognize his claims. When the federal marshals arrive, they will use this exact document to prove he operated with clear, intentional spite." While we secured the legal victory inside the pristine Wilmington high-rise, my husband was likely returning to his young mistress, expecting a hero greeting. He believed his bold legal maneuver proved his strength. He envisioned Kelsey looking at him with renewed admiration, awed by his relentless tactics. He thought the frivolous lawsuit demonstrated his superior intellect and unwavering resolve. But Kelsey was a commercial real estate agent, trained to recognize the lethal consequences of judicial scrutiny. When Derek proudly displayed the copies of the court filings he submitted, she would not see a brilliant tactician. She would see a reckless fool who just invited a magistrate to examine their lives under a microscope. She would read the perjury on his financial disclosure and realize he had painted a colossal, high-visibility target on the back of her uncle and their secret pharmaceutical shell company. Thieves rarely possess genuine loyalty. Their bonds are forged in the shallow fires of mutual convenience and rapid profit. When the profit vanishes and the sirens begin to sound, the fragile alliances shatter instantly. Derek was about to discover that the woman he chose over our 15-year marriage did not view him as a partner. She viewed him as a profound liability. The walls of his new life were already beginning to crack under the immense pressure of his own foolishness. A cornered animal makes predictable mistakes, but an arrogant man authors his own demise. He was walking back into that motel room, carrying the very documents that would inspire his accomplices to betray him entirely. The secure line chimed again, pulling my focus away from the signed discovery motion. My private investigator, Marcus, requested an immediate audio connection. I tapped the acceptance icon. Marcus operated with quiet efficiency, preferring raw data over dramatic interpretation. He spent the past 3 hours parked across the street from a budget roadside lodge situated on the industrial outskirts of Dover. The establishment featured peeling yellow paint and a flickering neon vacancy sign, offering a stark visual contrast to the waterfront luxury my husband tried to purchase earlier that afternoon. "The secondary target is mobile," Marcus reported, his voice steady over the encrypted cellular channel. "Kelsey Monroe just exited the second-floor unit. She carries 2 large leather travel bags. Her movements indicate a high level of urgency. She is not packing for a brief weekend excursion. She is orchestrating a permanent departure." I instructed Marcus to maintain his surveillance perimeter and observe her exit vector. The sudden flight did not surprise me. The young commercial property agent possessed a keen understanding of public legal records. While Derek wasted his afternoon filing a foolish handwritten petition at the family court, Kelsey likely utilized the quiet motel room to access the chancery docket. She searched for her own name. She found a terrifying reality waiting in the digital files. The emergency injunction Camille drafted did not merely freeze the real estate escrow account. The legal order explicitly named Kelsey as a primary conspirator in a federal notary fraud operation. Her state commission number, her business address, and her signature were featured as central exhibits in the financial theft. As an industry professional, she recognized the lethal gravity of those allegations. A standard civil dispute might result in a fiscal penalty, but forging a signature on a residential loan document guaranteed a lengthy sentence in a federal penitentiary. Kelsey grew up watching her Uncle Nathan navigate the treacherous waters of corporate pharmaceuticals. She observed him survive a catastrophic scandal by shedding his liabilities and signing away his former colleagues. He taught her a grim philosophy regarding self-preservation in the business world. When a vessel begins taking on water, you do not waste energy patching the fractured hull. You secure the only functional lifeboat and you row away. Derek was the fractured vessel. Kelsey harbored zero genuine affection for the residential contractor. He served as a convenient instrument to further her own ambition. She wanted a lucrative seat within her uncle and his new illicit enterprise. She viewed Derek as a temporary key required to unlock the stolen oncology research and deliver the initial capital. The moment the escrow account locked the key, lost all functional value. My terminal emitted a soft chime. A secondary digital dashboard monitored the remaining fractional assets tied to my original banking profile. Derek had established a small tertiary checking node at a regional credit union, linking it to the stolen equity just hours before the judicial freeze propagated through the system. The account held exactly $8,000. It was a shallow emergency reserve, intended to cover incidental expenses during the shell company formation. The screen flashed a high-priority withdrawal alert. An electronic transfer initiated from a mobile device drained the entire reserve in a single keystroke. The ledger balance dropped to zero. She took the reserve capital I stated aloud, watching the red numerical zero blink on the monitor. She just loaded the luggage into a rideshare vehicle Marcus confirmed from his observation post. The driver is heading toward the interstate. The target is abandoning the theater of operations. She left him nothing. While his mistress cleared the digital vault and fled the jurisdiction, Derek stood inside a predatory lending storefront a few miles down the highway. The traditional banking sector had permanently exiled him. The injunction poisoned his financial identity, rendering his credit score entirely radioactive. He sought a high-interest bridge loan to cover his immediate legal expenses and secure a new hotel room. He approached the plexiglass window, offering his counterfeit corporate shares in Apex Solutions as collateral. The clerk behind the counter ran a preliminary background screen utilizing a standard risk assessment algorithm. The system rejected the inquiry instantly. The clerk slid the paperwork back across the counter, refusing the transaction. Derek was forced to walk out of the neon-lit storefront empty-handed, his pride suffering another brutal laceration. Marcus provided the next visual update. The luxury rental sedan pulled into the cracked asphalt lot of the Budget Lodge. Derek stepped out of the vehicle holding a cheap plastic folder containing his rejected loan applications. His posture sagged under the invisible weight of consecutive failures. He ascended the exterior concrete stairs and unlocked the door to Unit 214. I closed my eyes and visualized his discovery. He expected to find a supportive partner waiting inside. He expected Kelsey to praise his bold pro se litigation strategy and offer comfort after the humiliating eviction from the title agency. Instead, he encountered a barren space. The closet hung open, stripped of all designer garments. The expensive cosmetics vanished from the bathroom counter. The room felt hollow. The lingering scent of her expensive perfume served as the only ghost of his failed ambition. Confusion likely paralyzed him for a brief moment before the primal instinct of panic took control. He would pull his cellular device from his pocket and open his banking application, praying the emergency reserve remained intact. He would stare at the zero balance. The undeniable proof of his total abandonment would wash over him. The criminal alliance dissolved the exact second the stolen capital evaporated. Greed operates as a highly effective adhesive only until the consequences arrive. The moment the risk outweighed the profit, the loyalty shattered into dust. Kelsey evaluated the balance sheet of their relationship and liquidated the remaining assets. She left him to face the federal authorities alone. The universe possesses a remarkable talent for poetic symmetry. 48 hours ago, my husband authored a cruel departure message and left it on my kitchen island. He promised I would never manage alone. He envisioned me crumbling into a helpless void, unable to navigate the world without his superior guidance. He intended to inflict a profound, crushing isolation upon me. Now he stood inside a cheap roadside room, breathing stagnant air, entirely stripped of his wealth, his partner, and his dignity. The silence he intended to force upon me now swallowed him whole. He possessed no home, no allies, and no viable escape route. His isolation mirrored the exact fate he so vindictively wished upon his wife. But an arrogant man rarely surrenders to reality without exhausting every possible delusion first. Derek would not accept defeat. His bruised ego demanded a savior. He required someone to validate his genius and rescue him from this self-inflicted disaster. He possessed only one remaining lifeline: Nathan. The disgraced pharmaceutical executive held the key to the shell company. Derek assumed the corporate partnership still retained immense value. He assumed Nathan would recognize his vital contribution and protect him from the incoming legal storm. He planned to demand sanctuary inside the Dover corporate office. I opened my eyes and looked at the corporate subpoena documents resting on the mahogany desk. My pharmaceutical firm had already dispatched a devastating cease and desist warning to Nathan and his illicit enterprise. The corporate shark was currently drowning in his own legal nightmare. Derek was marching toward a man whose entire empire was under siege. My husband assumed he would find a grateful friend waiting to offer salvation. He had no idea he was walking directly into the jaws of a predator who needed a scapegoat to survive the impending federal audit. The final betrayal was already set in motion. The digital tracking marker on my secondary monitor blinked, representing the rented luxury sedan navigating the southbound lanes of the coastal highway. Derek was fleeing the empty budget motel and driving directly toward the city of Dover. He sought sanctuary inside the corporate headquarters of Apex Solutions. My husband remained convinced that his business partner would provide a financial lifeline. He failed to comprehend the fundamental nature of the predator he chose to align himself with. Nathan did not build a lucrative career in the pharmaceutical sector by demonstrating loyalty to his subordinates. Years prior, the executive faced a severe industry scandal involving manipulated clinical trial results at a competing firm. When the regulatory agencies launched their inquiries, Nathan deflected the institutional blame. He surrendered his junior researchers to the oversight committees, protecting his own wealth and securing a quiet severance package. He survived the catastrophe by transforming his associates into human shields. Derek assumed their partnership relied on mutual respect. He thought providing the stolen oncology research granted him an equal seat at the executive table. He was tragically mistaken. Nathan viewed my husband the exact same way he viewed a disposable syringe. The tool held value only while it delivered the necessary compound. Once the injection finished, the plastic instrument became medical waste destined for the incinerator. Inside the Wilmington law office, Victor tapped a sequence of commands into his encrypted laptop. The head of corporate security prepared to initiate the digital bombardment. Our legal division finalized the cease and desist mandate 30 minutes ago. It was a masterpiece of corporate litigation, drafted by attorneys who specialized in crushing rival enterprises. The document did not merely threaten civil penalties. It outlined the precise sequence of the data theft. It referenced the compromised offline servers, the exact timestamps of the unauthorized download, and the proprietary nature of the oncology compound. Furthermore, the mandate promised to involve the Federal Bureau of Investigation if Apex Solutions attempted to commercialize a single molecule of the stolen research. Send the payload, I instructed, keeping my eyes focused on the screen. Victor executed the command. The electronic dossier bypassed standard email protocols and transmitted directly into the private executive servers housed inside the Dover office park. We utilized a forced delivery mechanism, ensuring the documents materialized on every single monitor Nathan currently operated. The corporate shark could not claim ignorance. The threat arrived with overwhelming, undeniable clarity. 90 miles away, Nathan sat inside his newly furnished office. The space featured minimalist leather furniture and abstract artwork designed to project an aura of established success. The computer monitors on his wide desk flickered. The menacing legal demands replaced his financial spreadsheets. I pictured the disgraced executive reading the opening paragraphs. His initial annoyance would rapidly curdle into genuine terror. Nathan understood the ruthless efficiency of my pharmaceutical employer. He knew our legal division possessed an operating budget larger than the gross domestic product of several small island nations. If we initiated a federal intellectual property lawsuit, his fledgling shell company would drown in litigation fees before the end of the fiscal quarter. More importantly, the mandate exposed the fatal flaw in his grand design. Nathan required clean, uncontested data to attract offshore investors. He needed the theft to remain undetected for at least 12 months. The immediate arrival of the cease and desist order proved the oncology research was highly radioactive. The asset he purchased with his niece acting as the broker was entirely worthless. The realization would trigger his survival instincts. The Rehoboth Beach escrow account remained frozen, denying his company the legitimate real estate facade required to launder the cash. His niece severed communication and fled the state. Now, a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate threatened to drop a federal anvil on his head. Nathan calculated his strategic options and arrived at the only logical conclusion. He needed to amputate the infected limb to save the patient. Derek steered his vehicle into the sprawling commercial complex in Dover. The architecture consisted of mirrored glass facades and manicured lawns projecting an atmosphere of quiet prosperity. My husband parked near the front entrance of the Apex Solutions building. His tailored suit felt damp with nervous perspiration. He adjusted his collar, attempting to project an image of confident resilience. He planned to walk into the executive suite, demand a cash advance from the corporate accounts, and formulate a strategy to contest my injunction. He approached the sleek glass double doors. He withdrew his magnetic security badge from his wallet. He swiped the plastic card against the electronic reader, expecting the familiar mechanical click of the locking mechanism. The reader emitted a harsh, descending tone. A red indicator light flashed across the digital sensor. Derek frowned, assuming a temporary system glitch. He wiped the magnetic strip against his trousers and swiped the card a second time. The machine rejected his credentials again. The heavy glass doors remained sealed, blocking his entry. He peered through the tinted glass. The modern reception area stood empty. He knocked on the door, his knuckles rapping sharply against the thick pane. Nobody answered. Upstairs in the executive suite, Nathan watched the security camera feed monitoring the front entrance. The disgraced executive did not feel an ounce of pity for the man standing on the pavement. Instead, Nathan focused on saving himself. He opened a secure communication channel linking his private terminal directly to Victor and our corporate security division. Inside the Wilmington office, a notification chime echoed from the laptop. Victor raised his eyebrows, a rare expression of surprise breaking his stoic demeanor. "We have an incoming transmission, originating from the Apex Solutions server," Victor announced, his fingers flying across the keyboard to intercept the data packet. "It is a massive encrypted archive." "Open it," I said, stepping closer to the screen. The security chief bypassed the encryption protocols, revealing a sprawling directory of internal communications. Nathan chose the path of total capitulation. He decided to offer my husband to the corporate slaughterhouse in exchange for his own immunity. The archive contained a meticulous ledger documenting every single phase of the criminal enterprise. I scanned the digital folders. The shark kept precise records. He surrendered the text message transcripts where Derek explicitly detailed his plan to utilize my stolen authentication token. He provided the audio recordings of their strategic meetings, proving my husband originated the concept of laundering the stolen residential equity through the coastal property purchase. Nathan even included the server logs demonstrating Derek initiated the unauthorized data transfer using the spoofed Internet Protocol address. It was a treasure trove of undeniable guilt. Nathan severed his own liability by transforming himself into a cooperating witness. He provided the exact forensic evidence required to guarantee a federal conviction. He delivered the final killing blow without ever leaving his leather chair. Down in the commercial parking lot, Derek stood before the locked glass doors. He pressed his face against the cool, tinted surface, shielding his eyes from the afternoon glare. He spotted a figure stepping into the reception area. It was a private security guard hired to monitor the facility. Derek waved his hands, gesturing toward the electronic reader. The guard did not move to open the door. Instead, the uniformed man held up a laminated sheet of paper, pressing the printed text against the interior glass. The bold typography carried a simple, devastating message. "Your employment and partnership status are terminated, effective immediately. Law enforcement will be notified if you trespass on this property." Derek stepped backward, his breath catching in his throat. The words struck him with physical force. He looked around the manicured corporate campus. The mirrored windows of the surrounding buildings reflected his solitary figure. He was entirely isolated. He reached into his pocket, grasping the keys to the luxury rental sedan. He possessed no destination. The budget motel room stood empty. The Rehoboth Beach townhouse remained locked behind a judicial order. The joint checking accounts held zero functional currency. His mistress vanished. His business partner discarded him like a broken component. My husband leaned against the warm metal of his vehicle. He stared at the pristine Delaware sky, struggling to comprehend the velocity of his downfall. He spent 15 years assuming he was the most intelligent person in any room. He spent 12 months engineering a plot to steal my ancestral land and destroy my professional reputation. He believed he controlled the narrative. He thought he dictated the rules of engagement. He failed to realize he was merely a pawn moving across a chessboard I controlled. The sun began its slow descent, casting long, dark shadows across the asphalt. Derek sank to the pavement, resting his back against the tire of his rented car. He possessed nothing but the wrinkled suit on his back and the crushing weight of his own profound failures. The quiet arrogance that defined his existence evaporated, leaving behind a hollow, terrified shell. Back in the law office, Camille organized the printed copies of the surrendered evidence into neat chronological stacks. The litigator smiled, her eyes reflecting the cold satisfaction of a flawless victory. We possessed the forged notary documents, the frozen escrow ledger, and the explicit digital confessions provided by the disgraced executive. The civil dispute concluded, Camille stated, sliding the thick dossier into a premium leather binder. This is no longer a matter for the family courts. She was right. The magnitude of the theft crossed multiple jurisdictional boundaries. We gathered the required ammunition. Now we needed to deliver the arsenal to the specific individuals who specialized in dismantling financial syndicates. The white-collar crimes division required notification. The quiet isolation my husband experienced in that commercial parking lot was merely a temporary pause. The real storm gathered on the horizon, and it carried the distinct metallic sound of federal handcuffs. The polished glass panels of the Wilmington Pharmaceutical headquarters offered an unobstructed view of the northern Delaware corridor. Sunlight fractured across the steel architecture, casting long geometric shadows over the city streets. I stood near the window, watching the synchronized movement of traffic far below. The chaos of the urban landscape felt distant and muted. Inside my corner office, a pristine silence reigned. The internal corporate espionage investigation had concluded. The forensic data packets compiled by Victor and his security division were securely transmitted to the appropriate government authorities. My role as the internal auditor was finished. The federal machinery was now awake and in motion. My mobile device illuminated on the sleek desk. The caller identification displayed Camille. I answered the line utilizing the speaker function. The litigator did not offer a standard greeting. She delivered the final verdict with the crisp efficiency of a seasoned prosecutor. "The United States Marshal Service just executed the warrant," Camille reported, her voice projecting a profound calm. "They apprehended your husband outside a discount automobile dealership near the Dover municipal border. He was attempting to liquidate his luxury rental sedan for unrecorded cash." I kept my gaze fixed on the skyline. "Did he fight the apprehension?" I asked. "He lacked the physical stamina to fight," she replied. The arresting agents noted he appeared deeply disoriented. They placed him in restraints in the middle of the dealership lot. He is currently being transported to the Federal Detention Center. The initial indictment covers 3 distinct felony counts: wire fraud, identity theft, interstate corporate espionage. The prosecuting attorney requested denial of bail based on his demonstrated flight risk and sudden lack of verifiable residential ties. The trap engineered inside the Mahogany Law Office had snapped shut with flawless precision. Derek thought he was playing a high-stakes game of residential real estate monopoly. He failed to realize he had triggered a federal prosecution. The stolen oncology data elevated his clumsy financial theft into a matter of national corporate security. He traded a comfortable 15-year marriage for a neon orange jumpsuit. The swift severity of the criminal indictment generated an immediate ripple effect across the civil justice system. Judges harbor a unique disdain for litigants who utilize family court petitions to obscure active federal felonies. The Chancery magistrate who initially froze the Rehoboth Beach escrow account reviewed the unsealed indictments and expedited our dissolution proceedings. We bypassed the standard mandatory mediation periods. There was nothing left to mediate. 2 days after his apprehension, I sat beside Camille in a quiet Sussex County courtroom. The wooden benches gleamed under fluorescent lights. The Great Seal of the State of Delaware hung proudly above the judicial bench. Derek did not attend the hearing. He was confined to a holding facility awaiting his arraignment. A court-appointed representative stood in his place, looking thoroughly defeated before the session even commenced. The presiding judge flipped through the thick binder of evidentiary exhibits. The magistrate read the sworn affidavit containing my forged signature. She reviewed the proxy server logs tracing his defamatory ethics complaint. She examined the verified records detailing his illicit transfer of my inherited poultry farm equity. The sheer volume of deceit insulated my position against any legal counter-argument. "This tribunal recognizes a pattern of egregious financial misconduct," the judge stated, her voice echoing through the hollow chamber. The respondent engaged in a calculated effort to strip the petitioner of her legitimate ancestral inheritance, while simultaneously orchestrating the theft of corporate intellectual property. The gavel struck the sounding block. The sound was sharp and decisive. The magistrate granted the immediate dissolution of the marriage. The ruling awarded me 100% of the remaining marital assets. I retained sole, undisputed possession of the Lewis coastal property. The fraudulent secondary mortgage was officially voided by judicial decree, compelling the lending institution to pursue Derek directly for their lost capital. He walked into the marriage with a failing construction business, and he departed with a multi-million-dollar restitution mandate hanging over his neck. I walked out of the courthouse inhaling the crisp Atlantic air. The heavy atmospheric pressure that haunted my existence for the past several weeks dissipated. I unlocked the doors to my vehicle and prepared to drive back to the quiet sanctuary of my home. Before I could start the ignition, my phone vibrated. The screen displayed an incoming call from Megan. My former sister-in-law possessed a profound talent for maintaining plausible deniability. During our tense encounter in her hallway, she projected an aura of oblivious innocence, while simultaneously hiding Derek and his custom golf clubs. She assumed her biological connection shielded her from the blast radius of his poor decisions. She believed she could facilitate his escape without absorbing any collateral damage. I accepted the connection, pressing the device to my ear. "Valerie, please!" Megan sobbed. Her voice cracked, fracturing under the weight of sudden terror. "You have to tell them! I knew nothing about the stolen money!" I listened to her ragged breathing. The arrogant sneer she wore during my prior visit was entirely gone. 2 agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation are sitting in my living room right now. Megan continued her words, tumbling out in a frantic rush. "They are confiscating my computer hardware. They possess a search warrant citing my internet network as a secondary transmission node for the stolen pharmaceutical data. Derek used my wireless connection when he stayed here. You have to call your corporate lawyers. Tell them I am innocent. Please do not press charges against me." I pictured Megan standing in her meticulously decorated living room, watching federal agents pack her digital life into sterile plastic evidence bags. She aided a thief because she enjoyed watching my life unravel. She nurtured his vindictive ego and provided him with a safe harbor. Now the harbor was burning. "I cannot control the trajectory of a federal investigation, Megan," I replied, maintaining a cool, measured tone. "Your brother utilized your residential network to traffic classified oncology research. The government views you as a potential accomplice." "I am family," she wept. "You cannot let them do this." "You forfeited that title the moment you helped him hide his assets," I countered. My voice contained zero sympathy. "My advice is simple. Stop talking to the investigators. Retain a competent criminal defense attorney immediately." I ended the call, severing the connection before she could utter another plea. I placed the phone onto the passenger seat. I did not feel a triumphant thrill. I only felt the quiet, steady rhythm of a universe rebalancing its scales. Actions require payment. The invoice had finally arrived. I shifted the vehicle into drive and navigated toward the coastal highway. The route stretched forward, flanked by tall marsh grasses and the distant blue expanse of the ocean. The Delaware landscape offered a sense of enduring permanence. It survived harsh winters and relentless hurricanes. It bent, but it never broke. My grandfather understood that resilience when he built the poultry farm. I finally understood it now. Somewhere 90 miles north, my ex-husband sat inside a federal holding cell. The environment would consist of cinder-block walls, a steel bench, and unforgiving fluorescent illumination. The cheap, tailored suit he wore to the title agency was gone, replaced by a standard-issue uniform. He possessed no cellular phone. He maintained zero access to high-speed internet. The bank accounts were frozen. The mistress was a ghost. The disgraced corporate shark had sacrificed him to save his own empire. Derek was stripped of every single illusion he spent a lifetime constructing. I thought about the cruel handwritten note he left on my kitchen island. He wrote those words believing they would serve as my epitaph. You will never manage alone. You will come crawling back. He intended to inflict a crippling dependency upon me. He wanted to break my spirit and force me to beg for his return. He projected his own profound insecurities onto my character. The poetic justice manifested with undeniable clarity. The man who arrogantly predicted I would perish in isolation was now locked inside a cage. He was surrounded by concrete and iron. He possessed no allies. He harbored no hope of a miraculous rescue. He was experiencing the exact terrifying solitude he designed for me. Derek was entirely and profoundly alone. I drove down the familiar coastal roads, feeling the warm sun radiating through the windshield. The sprawling corporate espionage, the forged signatures, and the illicit shell companies were reduced to archived legal files. The storm had passed. I returned to my quiet house by the sea, unlocking the front door with a steady hand. The silence inside my home was no longer a haunting void. It was a canvas waiting for a new beginning. 6 months passed. The Delaware coastline transitioned from the bitter chill of early spring into the golden warmth of late summer. The Atlantic Ocean stretched toward the eastern horizon, reflecting the cloudless sky like a polished sapphire. I stood on the wraparound cedar porch of my Lewis property, holding a ceramic mug of dark roast coffee. The structure resting behind me bore zero resemblance to the dwelling I once shared with a man who attempted to dismantle my existence. I hired a renowned local architectural firm to gut the interior framing. We removed the dark hardwood floors he originally selected. We tore down the restrictive dividing walls, creating a sprawling, open-concept layout flooded with natural coastal illumination. The heavy leather furniture he preferred was donated to a municipal charity operation. In its place, I curated a collection of linen sofas, light oak accents, and vibrant artwork painted by regional shoreline artists. The residence finally breathed. It reflected my personal aesthetic, my financial labor, and my undisputed legal ownership. My professional trajectory mirrored the physical transformation of my estate. The pharmaceutical board of directors did not merely issue a private commendation for my role in neutralizing the corporate espionage threat. They restructured the entire compliance division and placed me at the highest pinnacle. As Senior Director of Global Auditing, I now commanded an expansive department operating across 3 distinct continents. I no longer spent my weekday afternoons untangling minor vendor invoice discrepancies. I advised the Chief Executive Officer directly on systemic risk mitigation and secure data architecture. The upper management looked at me with a complex mixture of deep respect and subtle trepidation. They knew I possessed the capability to uncover any buried secret hidden within their ledgers. They understood I operated without fear or hesitation. My reputation preceded me in every boardroom I entered. Saturday morning arrived, carrying a gentle, fragrant breeze off the saltwater marshes. I wore comfortable canvas trousers and a simple cotton shirt, kneeling in the rich, dark soil of my backyard garden. My late grandfather taught me that tending to the earth provided a unique, reliable anchor to reality. I was cultivating a long row of lavender along the southern wooden fence line. The vibrant purple blooms promised to attract local pollinators and filled the humid evening air with a calming herbal fragrance. My bare hands were covered in damp earth. The physical labor felt deeply rewarding. It was a tangible, organic creation, providing a stark contrast to the digital spreadsheets and corporate financial projections that dominated my standard routine. My cellular device rested on a nearby stone bench. The high-definition screen illuminated, signaling an incoming voice transmission. The digital display registered an unknown 10-digit number. Prior to the harrowing legal storm I weathered, I might have ignored an anonymous caller, assuming it was a telemarketer or a misplaced connection. Today, I harbored zero anxiety. I wiped the loamy soil from my fingers using a rough canvas towel and picked up the phone. I tapped the green acceptance icon, raising the speaker to my ear. I offered a standard polite greeting, waiting for the individual on the other end to identify themselves. A heavy static filled the line, followed by a sharp, ragged intake of breath. The voice echoing through the receiver sounded hollow, stripped of its former arrogant resonance. It belonged to a human being standing at the very bottom of a dark, inescapable abyss. "Valerie," the voice whispered. It was Derek. The ambient background noise indicated a crowded public facility, perhaps a communal telephone bank inside a minimum security halfway house. I could hear the faint sound of shoes squeaking on linoleum floors and distant intercom announcements. He was currently awaiting his final federal sentencing hearing, scheduled for the following month. The discount public defenders he eventually secured managed to negotiate a restrictive plea agreement requiring him to surrender whatever microscopic dignity he still retained. "I heard about your recent promotion," he continued, his tone carrying a fragile, desperate vibration. "My sister told me about the new executive position. And the house. She said you renovated the entire property. You did it all alone. You built an incredible empire while I lost everything I ever valued. I made a catastrophic error, Valerie. I am so sorry for what I did to you. Can we talk? Please, just say something to me." He waited for my response. He anticipated a burst of righteous anger. He braced his shoulders, expecting a barrage of vindictive insults and cruel taunts. He wanted me to scream into the receiver because a screaming woman still cares about the man causing the distress. Fury implies an enduring emotional tether. Outrage indicates the old wounds still possess the power to inflict pain upon the victim. A heated argument would grant him a tiny sliver of significance. It would validate his continued existence in my mind, but I felt zero anger. Standing under the bright Delaware sun, looking out over the pristine landscape my ancestors cultivated, I experienced a profound, unshakable tranquility. The man speaking through the cellular connection was a stranger. He was a ghost from a previous lifetime, a minor character in a story I already finished writing. The terror he tried to inflict upon me 6 months ago had metabolized into pure, resilient strength. I did not utter a single syllable in response to his pathetic plea. I held the phone steady against my ear and let the heavy silence stretch across the digital network. 1 second. 2 seconds. The quiet expanded, becoming a dense, physical entity pressing against his eardrum. 3 seconds. 4 seconds. He needed my rage to prove he still mattered. 5 seconds. 6 seconds. I offered him nothing but the vast, echoing void of his own total irrelevance. 7 seconds. 8 seconds. I listened to his irregular breathing, sensing the exact, agonizing moment he realized he no longer occupied any space within my universe. 9 seconds. 10 seconds. I lowered the device and pressed the red button, terminating the connection permanently. I placed the phone back onto the stone bench. I did not look at the dark screen again. The chapter was permanently closed. I returned to the garden, kneeling beside the freshly dug trench. I picked up the next lavender plant, carefully loosening the delicate roots before placing it into the earth. The midday sun warmed my shoulders, easing the tension from my muscles. The coastal breeze carried the distinct scent of ocean salt and blooming wildflowers. A flock of white seabirds charted a graceful path across the clear blue sky, heading toward the open water. I secured the soil around the base of the plant, pressing the dirt firm with my bare hands. I was 42 years old. I survived a deliberate, calculated conspiracy designed to erase my legacy and destroy my professional credibility. I stood my ground, utilizing keen intellect, boundless patience, and undeniable forensic truth. The traitor, who proudly predicted my ruin, was a forgotten shadow fading into the sterile beige walls of a penal institution. He assumed my kindness equated to weakness. He learned a devastating lesson about the perilous danger of underestimating a meticulous woman. I possessed a thriving, lucrative career, a beautiful, secure home, and an unbreakable, resilient spirit. I built a fortress of stability using the very stones my enemies threw at me. I stood up, dusting the dry earth from my canvas trousers. I looked toward the shoreline, listening to the rhythmic crashing of the waves against the sandy beach. The sound was eternal and profoundly soothing. I breathed in the fresh coastal air, smiling at the quiet, beautiful reality of my perfectly autonomous life. I was safe. I was whole. I was finally and wonderfully free. When we bear witness to the spectacular collapse of an adult life, a marriage shattered by deceit, a career dismantled by greed, a once proud individual sitting isolated in the ruins of their own making, we often treat the disaster as a sudden, unpredictable tragedy. We observe the fully formed betrayer and wonder how a person could veer so drastically off the path of human decency. We look at the wreckage of someone like Derek and ask where the sudden moral failure originated. But the quiet, unsettling reality is that adults rarely commit spontaneous acts of character assassination. The collapse of a life is never an overnight event. It is the final, inevitable harvest of seeds planted decades earlier in the quiet, formative shadows of childhood. When we reflect on the unyielding resilience of a woman who protects her legacy, contrasted with the catastrophic downfall of a man who tried to steal it, we are not merely analyzing a tale of corporate espionage and divorce. We are staring directly into a mirror, reflecting the most critical, uncompromising undertaking in American culture, the monumental task of parenting. The individuals we invite into our homes, our businesses, and our lives are the direct living products of the values instilled or fatally neglected in their youth. In modern American society, we are frequently seduced by the glossy veneer of rapid, effortless success. The cultural narrative often celebrates the hustle, the clever shortcut, and the swift acquisition of status, looking the other way if the methods employed exist in a moral gray area. Yet, as the story of a husband's hollow ambitions so painfully demonstrates, raising a child on a steady diet of entitlement and superficial victories produces an adult utterly incapable of navigating the heavy weather of real life. Honesty and fairness are not merely quaint traditional family values meant to be cross-stitched onto a decorative pillow. They are the structural rebar of a human soul. When we shield our sons and daughters from the harsh consequences of their actions, when we fail to teach them that true equity is earned through honest labor rather than clever manipulation, we are raising the architects of their own future prisons. A legacy of survival and hard work, much like an inherited coastal farm, is built on the understanding that the soil only yields exactly what you are willing to cultivate. Within a traditional family structure, we must continuously ask ourselves, are we teaching our children to respect the difficult, grueling harvest? Or are we secretly teaching them how to steal from their neighbors' fields? Perhaps the most glaring deficit in a betrayer's character is a terrifying lack of emotional awareness. When faced with professional stagnation or personal insecurity, a hollow individual lacks the internal fortitude to look inward and assess their own shortcomings. Instead, they seek external validation through deceit, stolen funds, and the fabricated power of manipulation. They blame the world for their inadequacies. Cultivating true emotional awareness means teaching a child the courage to sit with their own inadequacy, their own boredom, and their own failures without demanding a scapegoat. We must guide our youth to understand that discomfort is not an enemy to be avoided at all costs, but a strict, vital teacher meant to be heeded. A chilling, immaculate calm in the face of absolute betrayal does not materialize out of thin air. It is the product of deep emotional regulation, a learned capacity to separate panic from reality, a skill passed down through generations of steady, grounded guidance. Parenting within a strong family unit is not about preventing a child's tears. It is about teaching them how to read the map those tears provide. Family responsibility extends far beyond the perimeter of our own front doors and the immediate comfort of our living rooms. When we raise our children, we are literally molding the future spouses, business partners, and community leaders of tomorrow. A child raised without a sense of enduring duty to their family unit becomes an adult who views the people around them as disposable utilities. The terrifying ease with which some individuals attempt to sever their partners from their rightful heritage speaks to a profound, tragic detachment from the sacredness of family bonds. Long-term guidance requires us to show our children that their actions ripple across generations, outliving them by decades. The legacy of a family is not measured by the balance in an offshore escrow account, nor the square footage of a coastal property, but by the weight of the integrity attached to their surname. We must urgently revive the understanding that we belong to something infinitely larger than our individual appetites. It is in the quiet, unglamorous moments of our domestic lives that these eternal values are forged. It is in the way we correct a minor lie told at the dinner table. It is in the way we require a child to return a toy they took without asking, regardless of the inconvenience. It is in the way we as parents swallow our own pride to admit our mistakes and model genuine apologies. These micro-interactions serve as the silent coding of a child's moral compass. If we fail in these small, exhausting daily moments because we are too tired to enforce a boundary, we invite the grand tragedies of adulthood to take root. We are actively writing the scripts that our children will act out 30 years from now on stages we will never see, in relationships we will never be a part of. We are either building resilient fortresses or fragile houses of cards. These profound human narratives, the tales of enduring resilience, brutal betrayal, and ultimate justice, serve as vital reminders of the high stakes we play for every single day of our lives. They force us to examine the foundations of our own homes and the legacies we are actively building. If you find value in these deep reflections, and if you seek to explore the complex tapestry of human behavior, I encourage you to subscribe and follow Emily Told Stories. Here, we unravel the intricate threads of our shared humanity, offering narratives that do more than merely entertain. They illuminate the path forward and challenge us to live with greater, fiercer intention. Join us and let these stories shape the way you view your own journey. As we look out over the landscapes of our lives, watching the sun cast long shadows over both the flourishing gardens of the innocent and the cold isolation of the guilty, we are left to ponder the ultimate aim of our guidance. Conventional wisdom loudly insists that the primary goal of parenting is to ensure a child's perpetual happiness, to serve as a relentless shield against the cruelties of an unforgiving world, and to provide a permanent safety net. We are told that unconditional love means unconditional rescue. But perhaps this is the most dangerous, paralyzing myth of modern culture. The ultimate goal of raising a human being is not to guarantee their comfort, but to guarantee their character. And character is never forged in the absence of pain. If we truly love our children, we must embrace a profound, unsettling truth. The greatest act of parental devotion is often the willingness to become the temporary villain in their story. It is the conscious, agonizing decision to withhold the rescue. We spend our entire lives striving to build a sanctuary for our families, forgetting that true sanctuary isn't a physical place you can hand to them. True sanctuary is a fortress they must learn to build for themselves, constructed entirely out of the bricks of their own denied gratifications. If you never let them face the abyss alone, they will never discover they have the power to walk away from it.